Chapter 1477. Xihua. When Gu Han saw Lu Xihua's current state, he couldn't help but feel irritated because Lu Xihua's current state was too horrible to look at. At this time, there was not a single part of Lu Xihua's body that was intact, including her head. More than 80% of her skin and flesh were gone. Lu Xihua could be described as a skeleton with some flesh and internal organs attached to it. If it was not for the slight rise and fall of Lu Xihua's exposed heart, Gohan would have suspected that he was not looking at a living person at all, but a specimen of a skeleton with some internal organs on display in the medical school. Xihua, how did she become like this? Gohan asked bitterly, exuding an uncontrollable murderous aura. This was a murderous aura that wanted to smash the whole world into pieces. Mingyuan Jiandi could not help but shiver when he felt this murderous aura. His face showed a terrified expression, and he sighed in his heart. Since when could an immortal sword-wielder make him feel so afraid? Was this guy even a normal human being? They all came from the seamless corridor, so how could this Gohan be so powerful? It was the 12 Zhu Wu who did it. Mingyuan Jiandi did not answer, so Song Yifei took the initiative to say, "At that time, I was looking for you outside, and then I heard the news that the 12 Zhu Wu had besieged the city. At that time, I felt that I was still a member of the human race, and I could not watch the human race be destroyed by the 12 Zhu Wu. I wanted to do my part for the human race, so that I could live up to the world that gave birth to me and raised me. At that time, Lu Xihua was the president of the Human Sword Committee, so I wanted to take the initiative to find her and ask her to arrange a position for me, so that I would not be tricked by others. At the same time, I could also ask about you," Song Yifei said in a low voice, "but when I entered Yanjing and came to Lu Xihua through the hollow, I was about to give her a big surprise and a joke. Suddenly, her brother came to her and told her that he had news about you. You had come out of the seamless corridor, and were besieged by a group of Yuan Ko and needed help urgently." In the end, Lu Xihua casually said a few words, then immediately entered the void and left. I didn't have time to think and sneaked behind Lu Xihua. I wanted to go with her to save you. However, when I caught up with Lu Xihua, I found her surrounded by the 12 Zhu Wu's men. You weren't there at all. There were 5 Zhu Wus waiting for Lu Xihua. At this point, Song Yifei suddenly became resentful. Lu Yin is such a bastard. He's Lu Xihua's younger brother, but he framed his sister like this. He pushed his sister into a death trap. He's a complete bastard. You're saying that Lu Yin was behind this? Hearing Song Yifei's words, Gohan also seemed to be in disbelief. Lu Yin was a little guy that Gohan was very familiar with. Although he was a little short-sighted, he was still a kind child. At the same time, he was extremely attached to his sister. How could he harm his sister like that? However, Gohan didn't have time to think about Lu Yin's matter because Song Yifei quickly continued. How could Lu Xihua be a match for 5 Zhu Wu's men? She almost fell into a deadly situation immediately. I knew that even if I went out, I wouldn't be able to save Lu Xihua. Instead, I would only be trapped. Therefore, I immediately contacted my master, hoping that she could save Lu Xihua. Although Master rushed over immediately after receiving my message and didn't hesitate to consume a large amount of vitality to rush over, the 5 Zhu Wus were too strong. Lu Xihua had already been beaten into a broken rag doll by them. His body was torn apart and scattered in different places. When Master rushed over, Lu Xihua was only left with bones and internal organs. As soon as Song Yifei finished speaking, Gohan clenched his fists so hard that they made cracking sounds. One could imagine that if Lu Yin appeared in front of Gohan, Gohan would definitely crush Lu Yin's head. Sigh, I arrived a little too late. When I arrived, Lu Xihua was only left with these few things. Moreover, the 12 Zhu Wus intended to completely obliterate Lu Xihua's existence. In just a few seconds, I could only try my best to find all the bones, flesh, and internal organs that I could find. Then, I brought all of them into the void and sent them into the immortal-grade medical pod that I haven't used for hundreds of years. Mingyuan Jiandi continued Song Yifei's words. I remember that when I found Lu Shihua, she only had half a head, over 100 bones, half of her heart, and some other bits and pieces of flesh. That's all. If these things were on an ordinary immortal-grade sword wielder, she would probably have died long ago. Fortunately, Lu Shihua's sword mistress was the 10-winged angel sword. It was a sword mistress with terrifying defense and resurrection abilities. This sword still protected the last bit of Lu Shihua's soul so that she wouldn't completely disappear from this world. This was also the only chance I had to save her. Otherwise, she would have died before she could enter the immortal-grade medical pod. Initially, I thought that with the immortal-grade medical pod, Lu Shihua's injuries would be healed very quickly. After all, as long as her soul and head were still there, the rest of her flesh and blood were not important. The medical pod could regenerate them all. But I was wrong. These 5 ancestral sorcerers have made up their minds to kill Lu Shihua, so they left their powers of the natural order on Lu Shihua's body. Every piece of Lu Shihua's flesh, every piece of his bones, and even his soul has been touched by the power of the natural order. These powers of the natural order are constantly destroying what's left of Lu Shihua's body. Therefore, when Lu Shihua entered the immortal-grade medical pod, the medical pod was desperately repairing Lu Shihua's body, and the soul solution was constantly trying to repair Lu Shihua's soul. However, the more the medical pod repaired, the more rule powers were destroyed. Both sides maintained a stalemate. Almost 5 years have passed, and Lu Shihua is still the same as when I saved her. She is still the same. I can only rely on the constant consumption of medical resources and soul solution to keep Lu Shihua alive. During this period, I also thought of expelling these rule powers from Lu Shihua's body. It is easy to expel one rule power, but there are indeed 5 Zhu Wu's rule powers in a state where they are intertwined. Based on my understanding of the rule power, there is no way I can fight against these 5 Zhu Wu's rule powers. Moreover, these rule powers have completely fused with Lu Shihua's flesh and blood. If I forcibly expel these rule powers, I'm afraid that what little remains of Lu Shihua's flesh and blood will be completely destroyed. Then, instead of saving Lu Shihua, I would be giving her a quick death. So in these 5 years, I can only keep her alive. But right now, the medical resources and soul solution are almost all used up. These are all resources that I have accumulated through hundreds of years of trading. In just 5 short years they have all been used up. So, if you want to save your apprentice, first take out all the medical resources and soul solution you have on you. Then, think of a way to contact Frost Jiandi and have her bring some from Yuzhong City's warehouse to you. Otherwise, I won't be able to keep your apprentice alive. I have already tried my best. Mingyuan Jiandi said helplessly. Chapter 1478. Frost Jiandi. Gohan froze. Song Yifei said sourly, "That's right, you just came back so you don't know yet. Right now, Liuyan Ling is no longer a celestial sword wielder. She has already synchronized with the Sword of the Firmament and has become the 4th Emperor sword wielder in the history of the Liuyan family. Her title is Frost Jiandi. Your old lover is much more capable than you are. Hurry up and beg her to save your disciple." Beg her? Gohan smiled bitterly. I can't even get into Yuzhong City right now. How am I supposed to find her? That's your problem. But let me remind you, with the remaining medical resources and soul solution in the medical pod, your disciple can only hold on for another day and night at most. If you can't find these urgently needed things in a day and night, then your disciple will definitely die. Why are you still worrying so much? Song Yifei was a little anxious and began to speak without thinking. Don't tell me you don't want to beg Liuyan Ling? You don't want to lose face in front of your old lover? If I really have to beg Liuyan Ling to save my disciple, then even if I have to kneel in front of her, I won't hesitate. Gu Han looked at the skeleton-like Lu Shihua with a calm expression, then said faintly, "But I don't need to beg her, this disciple, I will save him myself." "Oh, it looks like you still have a lot of medical resources and soul solution on you. You can definitely hold on for a while." Song Yifei let out a sigh of relief and extended a hand towards Guhan. "Hurry up and take out your things so I can add them in." "I don't have any." What Song Yifei didn't expect was that Guhan would very straightforwardly spread his hands, indicating that he didn't have anything on him. "Then why are you still saying all this nonsense? You still don't want to beg Liuyan Ling?" Song Yifei was very annoyed by Guhan's teasing. "No, what I mean is that even without these medical resources, I can still save my disciple." The corner of Guhan's mouth twitched slightly. He lightly patted the cover of the medical bay with his right hand, and the tightly sealed glass cover was instantly sent flying by Guhan. The green liquid that permeated the medical bay gushed out of the medical bay, and only half of it was left covering Lucifer. The medical bay began to flash with red lights, and then it kept saying, "The medical bay has been destroyed. A large amount of medical resources have been lost. Medical work has been suspended. The patient is expected to die in 5 minutes. What are you doing? Are you crazy? Do you want to kill your disciple?" Song Yifei pushed Guhan angrily. She felt that Guhan wanted to give her disciple a quick death. "Yifei, do you think I'm the kind of person who would kill my own disciple? I know what I'm doing. Find me a living animal right now, preferably a pig, cow, or sheep. It should weigh as much as 2 human beings." Gu Han frowned and said to Song Yifei, "You're right." Song Yifei said, "What do you want a live animal for? Are you crazy?" Song Yifei was annoyed by Guhan's inexplicable request. However, before Song Yifei could say anything else, Mingyuan Jiandi put his hand on Song Yifei's shoulder. "Be a good girl and do as Guhan says," Mingyuan Jiandi said to Song Yifei. "But master..." Song Yifei wanted to say something more. "Go. Don't forget that this is the person you love deeply. If you are not willing to trust this person, why do you love him?" Mingyuan Jiandi's words made Song Yifei fall silent. She took a deep look at Guhan, then ran out of the ward and began to find a large animal according to Guhan's instructions. "Your Majesty, do you still have nanocapsules here?" Guhan asked Mingyuan Jiandi. "Yes, how many do you want?" Mingyuan Jiandi asked straightforwardly. "The more the better," Guhan replied. "I have all the nanocapsules here." Mingyuan Jiandi waved his hand and threw out 3 boxes of nanocapsules. Guhan counted and found that there were 40 boxes of nanocapsules in each box. Each box contained 50 nanocapsules, and each capsule contained 300,000 nanomachines. That was a total of 1.8 billion nanomachines. The price of these 3 boxes of nanocapsules was probably more than 10 billion yuan. "This should be enough." Guhan nodded, then swung the sword energy in his hand. Under the stunned gaze of Mingyuan Jiandi, the 3 boxes of nanocapsules, from the packaging box to the outer layer of the nanocapsules, were all crushed by the sword energy. 1.8 billion nanomachines were instantly suspended in the air. If the doctors saw Guhan wasting and using nanocapsules like this, they would probably be distressed. Of course, Guhan did not want to waste these nanomachines because in the next second Guhan also threw out 1.8 billion fragments of his consciousness, then attached them to the bodies of these nanomachines. Guhan instantly gained direct control of all these nanomachines. He really has so many fragments of consciousness. My God, what is he trying to do? Looking at Guhan's strange actions, Mingyuan Jiandi could not figure out what Guhan was trying to do. He could only faintly sense with his spirit sense that after the 1.8 billion fragments of consciousness entered the nanomachines, they immediately fell into the medical pod. At the same time, they crawled on Lu Shihua's body like a dense swarm of small insects. And then, a scene that made Mingyuan Jiandi feel incredulous happened. The power of the rules of the 12 Zhu Wu attached to Lu Shihua's body began to fade away at a speed that could be perceived quickly. First, it was the leg bone, then the sternum, and finally the skull, until the last bit of the power of the rules of the 12 Zhu Wu disappeared. The whole process took less than 5 minutes, but not only did Lu Shihua's body not suffer any damage during the process of the power of the rules fading away, he did not suffer any loss. Instead, he even grew a little more flesh and blood than before. The power of the rules of the 5 Zhu Wu, which had troubled Mingyuan Jiandi for 5 years and left Mingyuan Jiandi helpless, completely collapsed and disappeared without a trace in just 5 minutes. "What the hell did you do?" Mingyuan Jiandi suddenly grabbed Gohan's collar like a primary school student, looking at Gohan with a thirst for knowledge. "It's nothing. I just fought 8 billion battles." Gohan suddenly took a step back involuntarily and almost fell to the ground. At the same time, his body was instantly soaked with hot sweat. He only had time to reply to Mingyuan Jiandi before he immediately sat on the ground and began to adjust his breath in a meditative posture. Could it be that this guy actually controlled 8 billion nanomachines and used Lu Shihua's body as a battlefield, allowing each nanomachine to use a sword technique at the power of the rules and fight with the densely packed power of the rules attached to Lu Shihua's flesh and blood, and even his cells? Mingyuan Jiandi thought of this possibility. Then, like Gohan, he could not help but fall back and lie on the ground powerlessly. At the same time, he controlled 8 billion nanomachines to fight. How terrifying was Gohan's control of the fragments of consciousness. This guy was really not human. "Master, I've found the living thing." At this time, Song Yifei also returned to the ward, and with her came a big fat pig that was screaming. This big fat pig seemed to have felt its tragic fate. Chapter 1479. Gurgle. As if sensing its tragic fate, the big fat pig began to growl loudly as soon as it entered the ward. At the same time, it struggled frantically to escape from the ward. However, how could a pig break free from the control of a sword wielder at the immortal sword tier? Therefore, it could only be thrown into the ward by Song Yifei. Just in time. Gohan opened his eyebrows, and the fat pig, which was still growling, was controlled by Gohan's sword aura to fly directly above the medical bay. In the next second, the fat pig, which was still growling, instantly lost all sound. Its whole body turned into a cloud of blood mist. All the flesh and blood were minced to the size of nanometers by Gohan's sword aura, and finally fell into the medical bay. "Gohan, what are you doing?" Song Yifei looked at Gohan's operation in confusion, but Gohan did not seem to care about Song Yifei at all. He continued to meticulously control the 8 billion nanomachines to continue working. "Don't talk. Your man wants to rebuild his disciple's body." Mingyuan Jiandi's hand gently covered Song Yifei's mouth. After hearing his master's explanation, Song Yifei looked even more incredulous. He actually wanted to use the body of a pig to rebuild Lu Shihua's body. What was in Gohan's head? How could he come up with such a ridiculous idea? "You don't believe me? In essence, humans and pigs are the same. Their bodies are composed of carbohydrate. Except for some trace elements, there is almost no difference. Therefore, if a person can build a body piece by piece with nano-level materials like building a house, then even the body of a pig can be built." Mingyuan Jiandi said calmly. "Master, you mean Gohan is building Lu Shihua's body cell by cell like building a house?" Hearing his master's explanation, Song Yifei was completely stunned. This had completely exceeded Song Yifei's imagination. How abnormal must a person be to be able to do such an unbelievable thing? Although Song Yifei did not believe that Gohan could do this, as time passed, the body that was originally just bones actually began to have tiny capillaries attached to the bones, followed by blood-red flesh. Under Song Yifei's unblinking gaze, The body that was originally just bones actually began to gradually grow. Is this the legendary bone regeneration? Song Yifei murmured to himself in a daze. Unknowingly, 3 days and 3 nights had passed. During these 3 days and 3 nights, Guhan remained in a meditative state. He did not leave Lucihua's med bay for even a moment. As for Mingyuan Jiendi, after waiting for 2 hours, he lost interest and ran back to his room to play games. Only Song Yifei stayed by Guhan's side and waited with Guhan for 3 days and 3 nights. After 3 days and 3 nights, the skeleton in the med bay had completely disappeared, replaced by a bright red body. The reason why it was a bright red body was that at this time, Lucihua had only recovered about 50% of his flesh and blood. There was still about half of his flesh and organs that had not recovered. However, at this time, Guhan didn't seem to intend to repair it so painstakingly. Guhan took out his med bay, and then instantly transferred Lucihua's body into his med bay. Guhan's med bay instantly lit up with a green indicator light, indicating that it was working. At the same time, the display panel began to show that Lucihua's incomplete body was being treated. Clearly, at this time, Lucihua's body had reached the point where Guhan didn't need to directly control the nanomachines to treat him. The med bay could already undertake the following treatment work. F***CK, you really saved him. Guhan, you're so cool. How can you be so awesome? Song Yifei, who was a nurse, could of course see that Lucihua was fine at this time. As long as he came out of the med bay, he would be a living person again. She immediately couldn't suppress the excitement in her heart. She patted Guhan's shoulder hard and asked curiously at the same time. As a former nurse, Song Yifei was even more curious about how Guhan had managed to do all that. But what Song Yifei didn't expect was that when she patted Guhan's shoulder, Guhan suddenly fell down and fainted. Song Yifei was so shocked that she immediately felt for Guhan's pulse. Only then did she realize that Guhan was just tired and had fallen asleep. After 3 days and 3 nights of non-stop control of 1.8 billion nanomachines to carry out a high-precision physical repair project, even for someone like Guhan, his energy was at the point where he was about to collapse. This child, has he been watching over me all night? When Guhan opened his eyes again, he found Song Yifei lying on the edge of the bed with a trace of saliva hanging from the corner of her mouth. It was obvious that she was sleeping soundly. Guhan couldn't bear to disturb Song Yifei's sweet dreams. His body instantly disappeared from the bed. The next second, he was already standing in the room with his clothes on. And Lucihua's med bay happened to be in Guhan's room. Looks like this child is recovering well. He should be able to wake up soon. What made Guhan completely relieved was that the person in the med bay was no longer that terrifying and strange flesh and blood. Instead, it was Lucihua with his somewhat seductive pink skin. Judging from the progress bar of the med bay, Lucihua's body had almost recovered. The next step was to wait for Lucihua's soul to wake up from its long sleep. It actually consumed 2 billion of my consciousness fragments. After confirming that Lucihua was fine, Guhan couldn't help but show a pained expression. The reason why Guhan fell into a deep sleep so weakly was not only because he had consumed a lot of energy to control so many nanomachines, but also because Guhan had turned all 2 billion of his consciousness fragments into the most basic soul energy and sent them into Lucihua's soul. Although Mingyuan Jiendi had preserved a little bit of Lucihua's soul, this little bit of soul was too little. At the same time, under the wear and tear of the 12 Zhu Wu rules, it had become extremely fragile. Even if the body was completely restored, if the soul was not restored as well, Lucihua would still not be able to wake up. However, it was not like Guhan had never done something like restoring a soul before. Therefore, he sent his consciousness fragments into Lucihua's soul as nourishment for her recovery. It was also because of the loss of so many consciousness fragments that Guhan had no choice but to fall into a deep sleep. Guhan still remembered that the last time he restored Lu Qingping's soul, it had only consumed a few million consciousness fragments. However, treating Lu Sihua this time had consumed a total of 2 billion consciousness fragments. It seemed that the soul of an immortal sword wielder was also different from the soul of an ordinary person. Otherwise, why would so many consciousness fragments be consumed? Chapter 1480. Where am I? Is this the Nether World? No, isn't the Nether World Yuan Ko's territory? Where am I now? When Lu Shihua's hazy consciousness gradually began to wake up, she thought with some horror. Because her body was still very weak, Lu Shihua didn't even have the strength to open her eyes to look at the world. She could only think and guess by herself until she heard a very familiar voice. Since you're already awake, why are you still closing your eyes? Get up. Master. Hearing this voice, Lu Shihua suddenly had a huge force from the depths of her body. Then, she jumped out of the medical cabin and broke the cover that was originally covering the medical cabin. At this time, the sunlight outside the window was a little dazzling. The golden light and the newly grown eyes made everything Lu Shihua saw seem hazy. But there was one thing that Lu Shihua could not be wrong about. That was, her master was standing in front of her at this time, looking at her with a smile. Master, are you also dead? Lu Shihua wailed, and then her body softened. Her new body, which had stood up because of a sudden will, once again returned to its original fragility. Her whole body fell back into the medical cabin. Silly child, how can you curse your master to die as soon as you see him? Guhan glared at Lu Shihua, and then in a flash, Lu Shihua's naked body was held in Guhan's arms. Guhan's eyes swept over Lu Shihua's whole body, and found that everything had indeed returned to a perfect state. He nodded with satisfaction, and then picked up a set of Song Yifei's clothes that had been prepared in advance, and directly put it on Lu Shihua's body to cover her exposed body. Master, I am not dreaming. Am I not already dead? Lu Shihua opened her eyes again urgently, looked at Guhan, and said weakly, Come on. You are not dead, I promise you are not dead. Song Yifei on the side could not stand it anymore and said sourly. At the same time, she put a bowl of snow-white porridge on the bedside table beside the bed. Miss Yifei. Seeing Song Yifei, Lu Shihua was shocked too. She had never thought that she would see Song Yifei here. For more than an hour, Lu Shihua was immersed in the joy of reuniting with Guhan. He spoke incoherently for a long time before he gradually regained his senses. Guhan also told Lu Shihua everything that happened after Lu Shihua's body was dismembered by 12 Zhu Wu. Lu Shihua finally understood why he could come back from the dead. Miss Yifei. Thank you. I'll kowtow to you. Lu Shihua was a grateful person, so after knowing that he was saved by Song Yifei, he immediately struggled to kneel down to thank Song Yifei. Song Yifei was unwilling to accept Lu Shihua's kneeling, but he didn't know how to persuade Lu Shihua, so he directly ran out of the ward, leaving Guhan and Lu Shihua alone in the ward. Master, I've troubled you again. If it weren't for you, I'm afraid I would still be a skeleton. Lu Shihua looked at Guhan gratefully, and at the same time, she wanted to kneel down to thank Guhan. As a result, Guhan directly slapped Lu Shihua's buttocks. The newborn buttocks were particularly sensitive, so Lu Shihua instantly felt an indescribable excitement quickly swept through her whole body. Her eyes were filled with pink water, and she looked at Guhan with grievance. All right, just lie down obediently, I won't torture you anymore. Guhan sighed, patted Lu Shihua's head, and then asked Lu Shihua how she was ambushed by 12 Zhu Wu. In the end, Lu Shihua's face instantly showed an extremely sad expression. She wanted to say something but stopped for a while, but she still told Guhan everything that her good brother had done. I didn't expect that Lu Yin would actually turn into such a beast. This sort of beast doesn't deserve to live in this world. I'm going to kill him and clean up my family, Guhan said coldly. Master. Lu Shihua was shocked when he heard this. Although he had been harmed by his little brother to such an extent, Lu Shihua had never once thought about killing his little brother. Lu Shihua had originally wanted to persuade Gohan to give up, as he didn't want to seek revenge on his little brother. But when he thought about how furious his master was right now, he knew that persuading him wouldn't have any good effects. Thus, in the end, he decided to keep his mouth shut and wait for his master's anger to subside a bit before pleading for mercy on behalf of his little brother. "Master, what happened to you in the seamless corridor? What kind of place is that?" Lu Shihua turned to ask Gohan this question. Gohan gave him a simple description of the world within the seamless corridor, then told him that he had taken on a new master. At the same time, Lu Shihua now had a new grandmaster, but he didn't elaborate on any other details. Instead, he asked Lu Shihua, "Shihua, what's going on with this Lu Qingping? Is she really your adopted daughter?" "Master, you've seen Qingping? How is she? Is she doing well? Is she here as well?" Upon hearing Lu Qingping's name, Lu Shihua immediately grew excited. He looked left and right rather frantically, as though trying to find Lu Qingping's figure. "You dote on her very much?" Seeing the nervous look on Lu Shihua's face, Gohan narrowed his eyes. "I've embarrassed myself in front of you, master. 3 years after you left, your disciple decided that I would never marry anyone for the rest of my life. All I did was wait for you to come back. But Lu Yinhe, he was always busy trying to increase his own power, and he rarely stayed by my side. In the end, it was Qingping who warmed my life. Only when she was by my side would I feel a sense of happiness. This feeling was just like when I was by your side." Lu Shihua lowered his head, speaking shyly. "That's not right. Even if I'm not by your side, if you meet a man who dotes on you and loves you, you should live a good life with him. How can you make such a careless promise?" Gohan seemed a bit unhappy as he spoke. "Then how about this? When we return to Yuzhang City, I'll personally help you pick out some young geniuses. I guarantee that I'll find an ideal husband for you," Gohan said with a smile. "No. Absolutely not. There's no need for you to worry about something like this. Your disciple already has someone in his heart. There's no need for you to worry about me," Lu Shihua hurriedly said. "You already have someone in your heart." Gohan gave Lu Shihua a deep look, as though he had seen right through him. Chapter 1481. "No. Master, why do you care about this? I really don't have anyone I like," Lu Shihua insisted. "All right." Seeing Lu Shihua's insistence, Gohan nodded and pretended to be indifferent. "After I solve all the problems, if you still don't have anyone you like, I'll take care of you for the rest of your life." "Master?" Lu Shihua raised his head in shock and looked at his master. What he got in return was an affirmative look from Gohan. Lu Shihua's eyes instantly became moist. "My young friend Gohan is really open-minded and carefree. I'm so envious." Suddenly, a voice interjected. Then, the Ming Iris Sword Emperor walked in with a strange smile on his face. "Your Majesty Mingyuan, what are you envious of? What's there to be envious of?" Gohan shook his head. "If the person I became was half as brave as you, my young friend Gohan, I wouldn't have ended up like this today." Mingyuan Jiandi shook his head with a wry smile. His eyes had a deep look, as if he was recalling some unbearable past. At that moment, Gohan suddenly remembered. According to the records, Mingyuan Jiandi had once had a passionate love affair with a man. However, the love ended in a twist. After Mingyuan Jiandi ascended to the throne, he used his power to erase the whole thing. Therefore, the later generations did not know the truth of the love affair. They only evolved many different versions of the story based on the stories that were circulated among the people. One of the versions was that Mingyuan Jiandi fell in love with his sister's man, and the two sisters turned against each other. In the end, the man committed suicide. Well, it was really hard to explain what happened in the past. Alright, let's not talk about these boring things. But my young friend Gohan, I really admire you. Your control of the consciousness fragments has reached such a high level. It's still more than 100, no, more than 1,000 Mingyuan Jiandi. I admire you, Mingyuan Jiandi said sincerely. I wouldn't dare. Gohan responded humbly. Thank you, Mingyuan Jiandi, for saving my disciple's life. I'll do my best to repay you in the future. However, since my disciple has recovered, I'll take him back to Yuzhong City. Right now, the Yuan Ko must have surrounded Yuzhong City. I can't stay here any longer. I have to go back. That's what I wanted to tell you. The demonic iris sword emperor nodded. I didn't expect Guhan to have such a reputation amongst the Yuan bandits. There have been 8 universe-level bandits, and even a desolate-level bandit who took the initiative to attack. They've already entered Yuzhong City. Thanks to the help of this force, Yuzhong City and the 12 Zhu Wu are now entangled with each other. In my opinion, it won't be a problem to guard it for a month or 2. You don't have to worry too much, Gohan. Gohan was shocked by Mingyuan Jiandi's words. He really did not expect that at such a critical moment, the Yuan Ko would take the initiative to lend a helping hand to Yuzhong City. Then I have to go back even more. Guhan sighed. Since my friends have acted on my behalf, there's no reason for me, as their master, to stay here any longer. I have to leave. It seems that you've made up your mind to leave. Mingyuan Jiandi looked deeply at Gohan and said, But before I leave, I have something to give you. Come with me. Okay. Gohan did not hesitate and directly followed Mingyuan Jiandi. This is the information about the 12 Zhu Wu. Some of it is absolutely unknown to you humans. Take a look, it will be of some help to you. After entering the room where the black crystal was suspended, Mingyuan Jiandi threw a piece of paper in front of Gohan. The core of the 12 Zhu Wu is the blood bead. As long as the blood bead is not destroyed, the 12 Zhu Wu will never die. The last trump card of the 12 Zhu Wu is the 12 Divine Beings Killing Formation, which can gather the real body of Pengu and exert strength infinitely close to that of a sage. In the world, there is no other way to deal with it except the Zhou Tian Star Fighting Formation. Among the Wu people, there is a great wizard named Ingzheng who is still alive. He is hidden among the humans. The demon clan has met him by chance and fought with him. Ingzheng seems to be different from us. There is no filth in his body. Ingzheng is very ambitious and covets the 12 Zhu Wu's Zhu Wu blood bead. Once he gets the 12 drops of Zhu Wu's blood essence, Ingzheng can break through and reach the level of Zhu Wu. And once he takes the 12 Zhu Wu's blood bead, it is possible for Ingzheng to break through the level of Zhu Wu and reach the level of a sage. Just as Mingyuan Jiandi had said, the information about the 12 Zhu Wu's was unexpectedly detailed, and even included many of the 12 Zhu Wu's background. What was more frightening was that even Ingzheng, an existence who had been hidden for thousands of years, was also described in great detail in the information, and even exposed Ingzheng's ambition. The information made Gohan shocked. If the 12 Zhu Wu's strength was really so terrifying, then he might not be able to completely reverse the situation even if he went up there. At most, he could only buy some time for Yuzhong City. More importantly, from this information, Gohan had completely deduced Ingzheng's ambition and ultimate goal. He knew that Ingzheng would release the 12 Zhu Wu's sooner or later, because Ingzheng could only kill the 12 Zhu Wu's and get the Zhu Wu's blood bead in their bodies by using the power of the entire human race. If this information was given to the human race before the 12 Zhu Wu's broke through the seal, then the human race would definitely be aware of Ingzheng's ambition, and it would be impossible for them to give Ingzheng such a chance. It could be said that if this information had been given to the human race earlier, the human race would not have to suffer such heavy casualties today. Your Majesty, where did you get this information? Is it accurate? Why didn't you give it to the human race earlier? Gohan asked nervously and angrily. I don't know if it's accurate or not, but I can tell you that I got this information from the Heavenly Court. Mingyuan Jiandi said faintly, As for why I didn't give it to the human race, we'll have to settle the score from 300 years ago. More than 300 years ago, the 12 Zu-Wus also appeared once. Do you know how the 12 Zu-Wus were sealed back? Of course I know this. The human race joined forces with the Heavenly Court and used the Zhou-Tian star battle formation together with the Heavenly Court. That was how the 12 Zu-Wus were sealed outside the Shanhai Pass. Gohan said. That's right, but how do you think the human race and the Heavenly Court, who were originally mortal enemies, could suddenly cooperate with each other and establish absolute trust? Mingyuan Jiandi sneered. Back then, the human race's 3 Jiandis were forced into a corner by the 12 Zu-Wus, and Yanjing City was on the verge of collapse. They could only be thick-skinned and send someone to me, hoping that I could be the middleman to contact the Heavenly Court and use the Heavenly Court's power to deal with the 12 Zu-Wus. After all, I'm still a human. Of course, I couldn't bear to see the human race suffer such casualties. So, I agreed and contacted the Heavenly Court on behalf of the human race. In the end, the human race's Wuxing Jiandi and the Jade Emperor started a negotiation in my Mingyuan city. In the end, the Heavenly Court agreed to join forces with the human race to deal with the 12 Zu-Wus and build the Zhou-Tian star battle formation to suppress the 12 Zu-Wus. However, the human race and the Heavenly Court have been at war for hundreds of years. At the same time, there's also the existence of filth. It's difficult for the two sides to gain basic trust. So, in the end, I had to be the middleman and stay in the Heavenly Court with this black crystal. I wanted to use it to suppress the filth in the Heavenly Court's Yuan Ko's heart, so that when the two sides fight together, they can't help but attack each other because of the filth. The war lasted for 3 years. I also stayed in the Heavenly Court for 3 years. Every day, I chatted with the Yuan Kos in the Heavenly Court. Finally, I gradually gathered all the information about the 12 Zu-Wus, many of which the Heavenly Court has never told the human race. Later, the 12 Zu-Wus were sealed, and the human race gained peace. But they forgot about me. They didn't even invite me to the celebration party, which made me very disappointed. So, I simply left this information with me. I've never given it to the human race. I know that the 12 Zu-Wus will break out of the seal sooner or later. When that time comes, I'll make these humans suffer. Mingyuan Jiandi's face was filled with the pleasure of revenge. Mingyuan Jiandi's words also solved some of Gohan's doubts about history. Many people in the academic world were arguing that it was a super miracle that the human race was able to complete the joint war with the Heavenly Court without any friction between the two sides. This made the human race extremely puzzled. Now, the truth was finally revealed. It turned out that it was all thanks to Mingyuan Jiandi. But because they wanted to put an end to the betrayal of the sword-bearers, the human race had always treated Mingyuan Jiandi with a bad name. Mingyuan Jiandi's reputation among the human race could not be any worse. This was why the human race had the cheek to ask Mingyuan Jiandi for help. As a result, when the whole human race was having a super celebration party, which was also the highest glory, the human race actually threw Mingyuan Jiandi aside. Gohan could understand the reason, but the result was very sad. It made Mingyuan Jiandi completely give up on the human race. In fact, it could be imagined that at that time, Mingyuan Jiandi might have wanted to take this opportunity to clear his name, but in the end, he was played by the human race. It was no wonder that Mingyuan Jiandi kept this precious information until the end, and did not hand it over to the human race. Otherwise, after reading this information, the human race would definitely understand that the 12 Zu-Wus and Ingzheng's collusion. After learning the truth of the past, no matter how angry Gohan was with Mingyuan Jiandi, it now turned into a wry smile and helplessness. This was completely the human race's own doing, and it was not Mingyuan Jiandi's fault. Did they want Mingyuan Jiandi to be a good person who could be bullied by others? It was a pity that the human race's ancestors had to pay for the evil they had done. This was the so-called an eye for an eye. Chapter 1482. Looks like I can't go to Yuzhang City so rashly. If I go, I'm afraid I won't be able to get out, Gohan said helplessly after reading the information about the 12th Zhu Wu several times. This was because Gohan had already received 100% confirmation that he was currently no match for the 12th Zhu Wu. Yuzhang City would be of great help to him. Then where do you plan to go first? Mingyuan Jiandi looked at Gohan curiously and asked, "What do you plan to do?" "I plan to increase my and Shihua's strength first." Gohan thought about it and answered straightforwardly. Shihua had already reached 9 million quarks of sword essence 5 years ago. Now, he is only 100,000 quarks away from reaching 10 million quarks. I plan to help Shihua gather 100,000 quarks first, then obtain the 12-winged angel sword and let Shihua ascend to the throne first. Only an Emperor sword-level sword wielder can play a crucial role in battle. That's true. Shihua is indeed only one step away from an Emperor sword-level sword wielder. Mingyuan Jiandi smiled and nodded, but his face quickly showed a hint of a tempting smile. Actually, Gohan, little friend, I have another person I can recommend to you. If you can help her, she can also become an Emperor sword-level fighter. Wouldn't you be more confident then? You mean Ifei is also about to become an Emperor sword-level? Mingyuan Jiandi's words were not difficult to guess. After all, Mingyuan Jiandi only had one disciple, Song Ifei. Song Ifei was the only one who could ascend to the throne. Other than Song Ifei, Gohan could not think of anyone else Mingyuan Jiandi could ask to help him. That's right, yes and no. Mingyuan Jiandi admitted straightforwardly. How many quarks of sword essence is Ifei away from Emperor sword level? Is her Emperor sword level sword mistress also 100% synchronized? Gohan touched his nose and asked. I can guarantee that my 9 Deaths lifeless sword has already approved of Ifei. She has also agreed to become Ifei's sword mistress. The mystic Iris Sword Emperor pointed at the 9 Deaths lifeless sword hanging on his waist. The hilt was made of 9 skulls. Your Majesty, your Emperor sword-level sword mistress is called the 9 Deaths lifeless sword. This is an Emperor sword-level sword mistress that is not recorded by humans, right? Gohan looked at the 9 Deaths lifeless sword and said, That's right. Back then, I was infected by filth and was chased out by humans. However, my Emperor sword lady wasn't willing to leave with me, so all I had to do was cut off the mark on that sword. Who would have thought that not long after I left Yuzhang City, I would find this 9 Deaths lifeless sword hidden in a statue of a deity in a 3-room temple. Compared to the previous sword, this 9 Deaths lifeless sword is more compatible with me. Thus, it became my new Emperor sword lady. The demonic Iris Sword Emperor caressed the 9 Deaths lifeless sword's bone-like blade as he spoke. If your Majesty gives this sword to Ifei, what will happen to your Majesty? Gohan asked again. You don't have to worry about that. After so many years, I'm actually tired of fighting. You might not believe it, but I haven't held this sword in a fight for 100 years. When I pass the black crystal to you, I will be truly free. At that time, turning into a pile of bones will be my greatest wish. Swords and whatnot are no longer important. Mingyuan Jiandi waved his hand and said, Ifei's real problem is not her Emperor sword, but her sword essence. After all, this child started too late, and her talent in swordsmanship is indeed not as good as yours and Lionian Ling's. Although she has my full guidance, her progress has been very slow ever since she entered the immortal sword level. Her sword essence is only about 5 million quarks now, and her swordsmanship is not even 1/10 of your disciples. However, I am not a person who specializes in swordsmanship. I am not even a sword master, so I can no longer teach Ifei. I can only ask you to teach her some swordsmanship on my behalf. At the same time, help her increase her sword essence to 10 million quarks. Then I will be satisfied. Increase from 5 million quarks to 10 million quarks a month. When Gohan heard Mingyuan Jiandi's request, he instantly frowned. This is impossible. Unless I help her kill more than 10 Hong level Yuan Ko, where can I get so many sword essence for her? That's fine. Just teach her a little more. Anyway, as long as she has 10 million quarks of sword essence, I'll immediately pass on the 9 deaths lifeless sword to her. After that, whether she'll stay by your side and help you or not will depend on your own abilities. Mingyuan Jiandi said with a smile, then made a gesture to send him off. I'm tired. You can go now. Old fox, you treat me like a coolie. Gohan glared at Mingyuan Jiandi. Although he knew that Mingyuan Jiandi was using him, when he remembered that the other party was Song Yifei, Gohan could only be used willingly. Gohan believed in Song Yifei. If he could train Song Yifei to become an Emperor Sword level sword wielder, then with 2 Emperor Sword level sword wielder joining them, the future of mankind would be really stable. Ouch! Gohan pushed the door open forcefully, then heard a cry of pain. Then, he saw Song Yifei on the ground. Obviously, Song Yifei had been squatting at the foot of the wall, eavesdropping on the conversation between him and Mingyuan Jiandi. Did you hear what I said to your master? Gohan looked at Song Yifei and asked. Song Yifei did not answer, but his body trembled. Obviously, he had heard it. Since you heard it, then I won't say anything more. I'll leave in 10 minutes. If you want to go with me, go and pack your things. I'll only wait for you for 10 minutes. Gohan said coolly. Don't need 10 minutes, I'll be done in 5. In the end, Song Yifei immediately jumped up from the ground. 3 minutes later, he had changed into a new set of clothes and returned to Gohan's side, looking extremely excited. Let's go! Bringing his disciple and Song Yifei, who had returned to the team, Gohan said helplessly but also with some excitement. Thinking about the birth of 2 Emperor Sword level sword wielder in his hands, how could Gohan not be excited? After leaving Mingyuan City, Gohan released all his sword ladies from his control. Seeing the sky that they had not seen for a long time, the sword ladies were very excited and went off to play. Only Qingpin was still lazily in the infant pouch in front of Gohan's chest, looking like he had not had enough sleep. This fellow! It had been a long time since Gohan felt like he had a child in front of his chest. Stroking Qingpin's little head, Gohan could not help but smile. Stupid Daddy Gohan, you pinched my important part. You have to take responsibility. Suddenly, a child's childish voice came from Qingpin's hair. Gohan pulled the child out to take a look. He realized that his 2 fingers were pinching the pelvis between the 4th pauper's legs. No wonder the 4th pauper was angry to express his displeasure. Pervert! Gohan Daddy is a big pervert! The 3rd pauper flew out from Qingpin's hair and shouted. The rest of you, come out. Looks like I have to teach you a lesson today. Gohan said slightly jokingly. However, when Gohan searched in Qingpin's hair for a while, he was surprised to find that other than the 3rd pauper and the 4th pauper, the other 6 little fellows were not in Qingpin's hair at all. Why are there only 2 of you? Where are your other sisters? Gohan felt a little strange and asked. They are sleeping in my scabbard. They did not come out. Qingpin took the initiative to answer for the 3rd pauper and the 4th pauper. They have been sleeping in your scabbard for more than 10 years. Why haven't they slept enough? Gohan asked in confusion. Humph, I didn't sleep enough either. Qingpin said with a yawn. This is different. You really like to sleep, but they have never been like you. Gohan put the 3rd pauper and the 4th pauper back on Qingpin's head. Then he asked the 4th pauper, What happened to your sisters? Is there something wrong with their bodies? I don't know. Who knows about these stupid sisters? The 3rd pauper said with a pout. That's right. Those idiots love to sleep. They deserve not to grow up. The 4th pauper also mumbled. Aren't you too sleepy? Looking at the 3rd pauper and the 4th pauper, who were still alive and kicking, Gohan asked curiously. Not sleepy at all. If you don't believe me, look. The 4th pauper suddenly spat out a column of water from his mouth. It washed over Gohan's finger. It actually froze Gohan's finger directly. A freezing force went all the way up along Gohan's finger and even invaded Gohan's heart. Me too. When the third pauper saw the fourth pauper spit out water, he immediately followed suit. The same column of fire sprayed out. The same burning force of the flame followed Gohan's finger and invaded Gohan's heart. Rule force. Gohan's heart moved. The two forces of water and fire were shattered by Gohan's sword rule. However, this way, Gohan could also be sure that the fourth pauper was indeed using the water rule force. This was because when rule force and rule force attacked each other, there would be a rule force shockwave. This shockwave was the evidence to prove the existence of rule force. By the way, the fourth pauper once absorbed some kind of water artifact. After becoming a gem, he was resurrected. The third pauper also absorbed all the power of Bran's fire origin and became a gem. Then, he was resurrected. Gohan recalled that the third pauper and the fourth pauper had both become gems and then resurrected. It seemed that the rule force in their bodies was born from that change. Further speculating, the reason why the third pauper and the fourth pauper could still maintain their vitality, instead of hiding in the scabbard drowsily like their sisters. Could it be that the two of them had such a change, but the other six did not? Thinking of this, Gohan immediately poured out all the 6 little guys in Chingpin's Cambridge from the dimensional space. As a result, Gohan found that the situation was not good. How could these little fellows be greedy for sleep? It was obvious that they were drowning. Poor Ching was an idiot. If it weren't for Gohan's timely discovery, these 6 little fellows would have all died in less than a month or 2. Damn it, everything is coming together. Gohan couldn't help but feel a headache. At such a critical and important moment, the 6 paupers encountered such a crisis. Chapter 1483. Gohan, what's wrong with them? Seeing the remaining 6 poor people lying on the ground, looking like they could die at any time, even Ching Pin immediately woke up from her sleep and looked at Gohan nervously. Well, although I don't know what's going on, from a doctor's point of view, if we treat these 6 little guys as human beings, looking at their faces, they should be starving or about to starve to death. Song Yifei looked at the 6 little guys and said strangely, "Don't you usually feed them?" "Of course, the 8 of them eat more than I do. How could they be hungry?" Ching Pin said with a pout. To be able to compare with Ching Pin in terms of appetite, the 8th poor person's appetite was indeed not bad. That's strange. They clearly look like they're dying from hunger. Of course, I'm just analyzing it from a human point of view, Song Yifei said with a bitter smile. No, they're really starving, Gohan said with a serious expression. Don't forget, the 3rd poor person and the 4th poor person are fine, but the other little guys are sick. This means that the cause of the disease is the difference between the 3rd poor person and the 4th poor person and the other 6 little guys. The only difference is that the 3rd poor person and the 4th poor person have turned into gems before and have changed back. But the remaining 6 little guys have never done this before. This is probably the cause. The 3rd poor person, the 4th poor person, why did you turn into gems in the first place? Do you know? Gohan grabbed the 3rd poor person and the 4th poor person who were anxiously circling around his sisters and asked. Of course, it's because the 2 of us have absorbed enough origin energy. The 3rd poor person and the 4th poor person immediately replied. Thinking about it this way, it was indeed the case. The 3rd poor person had absorbed the water attribute divine artifact, while the 4th poor person had absorbed the origin energy of a fire attribute meteor level Yuan Ko. Then I understand. Gohan nodded. I remember Misaka Mikoto saying that the few of you were formed from the 8 zombie mothers after they died. Each of you needed 8 different elements to recover your true strength. Now that the 2 of you have absorbed enough origin elements, the 6 of you haven't absorbed any at all. It seems like the origin elements in their bodies are insufficient. That's why they're starving to the point where they're on the verge of death. Looks like we'll have to find a way to replenish their origin elements. Gu Han was able to analyze the situation based on the clues he had gathered. But Gu Han, this is only your guess. No one knows if this is the reason or not. Song Yifei said with a frown. That's easy. Let's find an origin energy to test it. Gu Han snorted. The Black Mountain Goblin, a dignified universe-level Yuan bandit, was of famous existence. More importantly, the Black Mountain Goblin had taken the lives of many male sword-bearers and humans. Over the past few hundred years there were almost 1,000 of them. The reason for this was that the Witch of the Black Mountain's demonic magic did not absorb the essence of the sun and the moon, but relied on the essence of men to live. Every 100 days or so, she must need the essence of an adult man to supplement her demonic magic. Otherwise, the Witch of the Black Mountain would die because of the backfire of her own demonic power. Over the past few hundred years, the Black Mountain Witch had killed so many people that it was at the top of the humans' must-kill list. Many immortal sword-level sword-bearers were looking for the Black Mountain Witch's lair everywhere. They wanted to kill this damned fellow to avenge those who had died. The old demon of Black Mountain was also well aware of this. Therefore, except for the necessary foraging, the old demon of Black Mountain hid in this nest and never showed up, lest he was killed by those sword-bearers of the immortal sword realm who were looking for him everywhere. But recently, the Black Mountain Witch had to come out every day, because it had not eaten the essence of an adult man for almost 100 days. Recently, all the human beings had retreated to Yuzhong City. Of course, the Black Mountain Witch did not have the courage to go to Yuzhong City to find food, but she could not even meet a team of sword-bearers outside. In desperation, the Black Mountain Witch could only search all over the world to see if she could be lucky enough to find 1 or 2 men and absorb their essence. But the 100 days were almost over, and the Black Mountain Witch had not found anything. Just when the Black Mountain Witch was about to feel desperate, a sudden hope appeared. Flying in the void and looking for food everywhere, Old Goblin Black Mountain suddenly found a spirit sword-level swordsman with tattered clothes and scars all over his body walking on the road. The most important thing was that this spirit sword-level swordsman was a man. Strange, why is there a male sword-bearer alone? For this spirit sword-level swordsman who suddenly appeared in front of him, Old Goblin Black Mountain still held a cautious attitude at the beginning. Such a lone and scarred male swordsman seemed to be too coincidental. But soon, the old witch of the Black Mountain smelled something familiar from the other party. This is the smell of 12 Zuwu. It seems that this man escaped from 12 Zuwu. Of course, the Black Mountain Witch could not fight with the famous 12 Zuwu, but she had also seen 12 Zuwu from a distance and remembered the special smell of 12 Zuwu. Then, he would be prepared so that he could escape immediately when he encountered the 12 ancestral sorcerers. Now the Black Mountain Witch smelled the smell of 12 Zuwu from this man, which meant that this man had escaped from the battlefield of 12 Zuwu. This could also explain why the other party was in ragged clothes and hurried to Yuzhong City. He must be a sword-bearer who was left alone in the battle in London City. After figuring this out, the Black Mountain Witch was relieved and felt that the other party should not be a trap. After carefully searching the void within a radius of 100 kilometers, the old demon of the Black Mountain was completely relieved when he confirmed that there were no beings of the immortal sword tier hiding in the void. As long as there was no immortal sword-level sword-bearer hiding in the dark to attack her, she was 100% sure that she could absorb all the essence of this man. So in the next second, an emerald green bud suddenly appeared on Old Witch Black Mountain's bark-like, bumpy skin. This bud germinated and grew rapidly, and in just a few seconds, it grew into the appearance of a beauty. This beauty had a slender figure and a beautiful face. Her entire body exuded an aura that could topple cities. She was a great beauty that could not be found in 10,000. Xiaoqian, if you eat this prey for me, I will give you 3 days of freedom, the old witch of the Black Mountain said proudly to the beauty. Nie Xiaoqian was an 18-year-old beauty, but she died at the age of 18. Her ashes were buried in the roots of the old witch of the Black Mountain's clone, and her soul was controlled by the old witch of the Black Mountain. She became a puppet used by the old witch of the Black Mountain to seduce men and obtain their essence. Unexpectedly, after coming to this world, the Black Mountain witch also brought Nye Xiaoqian with her. And Nye Xiaoqian had a magical ability, that was, once Nye Xiaoqian turned into a human, all the characteristics of Yuan Ko would disappear without a trace. Unless a large detection equipment was used or a dimensional wall was directly used to verify, Nye Xiaoqian could hide from all detection methods. Even the sword bearer would never be able to tell that Nye Xiaoqian was Yuan Ko. The Black Mountain which was used to using Nye Xiaoqian as a bait. How many men were not lustful? Seeing that Nye Xiaoqian took the initiative to seduce them, they couldn't wait to have sex with her. As long as they ejected, the Black Mountain which could easily absorb the essence in the man's body through Nye Xiaoqian, and the man would naturally become a mummy because of the depletion of essence and blood. Thank you, Grandma. Nye Xiaoqian had long been used to this kind of task. She bowed to the Black Mountain witch and came out of the void. In an instant, she turned into a beauty in a shirt and denim shorts, and then suddenly rushed out of the bushes and directly fell on the body of the sword-bearer of the spiritual sword level. Master, save me! Master, save me! There are a few Yuan Ko chasing after me. Nye Xiaoqian said to the sword-bearer of the spiritual sword level in a panic, while the Black Mountain witch threw out a few little monsters that he had caught nearby and forced these little monsters to chase after Nye Xiaoqian, which led to the current scene. This was a method that the Black Mountain witch had used every time. An absolute beauty, plus a few Yuan Ko who were chasing after her, could perfectly create a scene of a hero saving the beauty, and those sword-bearers would not doubt Nye Xiaoqian, so they could easily take the bait. The fact seemed to be developing according to the script of the Black Mountain witch. Although the opponent was badly wounded, he still killed those unlucky little monsters very neatly. The dimensional vortex also appeared, and the whole world calmed down again. Why are you here alone? The male sword-bearer still asked with some vigilance. Master, you don't know, but I was originally a citizen of London. When I was moving with the army, I accidentally got separated and stayed in this forest for a long time. In the past, because of luck, I didn't meet Yuan Ko. I didn't expect to be found by Yuan Ko today. If I hadn't met Master, I'm afraid I would have become the food of these Yuan Ko. Nye Xiaoqian said with tears. Poor. Don't worry, I will take care of you. I will take you back to Yuzhang City. The sword-bearer immediately patted his chest and said, Thank you, Master. Nye Xiaoqian bowed again, and then her face suddenly turned a little pink, and she said shyly, Xiaoqian will never forget your great kindness. I have nothing to repay you with, so let me use this body to make you happy for a moment. How can I do that? The sword-bearer blushed and said quickly, This is a gift from me. Do you think I'm ugly, Master? Nye Xiaoqian suddenly threw herself into the man's arms, then reached down and grabbed, and said coquettishly, Master, you don't know, I've been in this forest for more than a month. Although I can still fill the mouth above, the mouth below feels hungry every day. Master, please touch it. It's already a muddy place. Master, please treat it as saving me. Nye Xiaoqian couldn't wait to throw herself on the man. After hesitating for a while, she immediately took out a tent from her dimensional pocket. The two immediately entered the tent and began to sleep. Chapter 1484. Ha ha ha, men are really stupid animals. This is great, I can finally eat my fill for a while. The old witch of Black Mountain immediately sent his demon power into Nye Xiaoqian's body, ready to absorb the opponent's essence through Nye Xiaoqian. But as soon as the old witch of Black Mountain's demon power entered Nye Xiaoqian's body, he immediately found that something was wrong. There was another rule power in Nye Xiaoqian's body, and this rule power seemed to have been waiting for him for a long time. As his demon power appeared, it immediately went up and attacked his body. Not good. Someone is plotting against me, retreat. The old witch of Black Mountain realized that something was wrong on the spot and immediately prepared to retreat, but it was too late. The rule of the whole void suddenly shook, and the old witch of Black Mountain was directly shaken out of the void. The tent was also taken back. Nye Xiaoqian, whose clothes were disheveled, knelt on the ground and looked at everything in front of her in horror, while the man stared at the old witch of Black Mountain majestically like Ling, "You plotted against me." How could the old witch of Black Mountain not understand that he had been plotted against by the man in front of him? "Humph, old witch of Black Mountain, when you plotted against my human compatriots, did you ever think about this day?" This man was naturally Gohan. He didn't want to talk nonsense with the old witch of Black Mountain anymore, so he directly sent several sword chis to kill him. "You are a spirit sword level swordsman, so what if you plotted against me? I originally wanted to let you die in a gentle place, but now it seems that I have to kill you. Although I will lose some of my essence, you asked for it," the old witch of Black Mountain said angrily, and countless branches and tendrils rushed out from all over the ground and rushed toward Gohan, trying to strangle Gohan into pieces. "You are really a plant type Yuan Ko." Seeing the branches and tendrils all over the sky, a smile appeared on Gohan's face, which made the old witch of Black Mountain panic. He made up his mind that he would not kill this man for now. As long as his vines could trap this man, he would immediately turn around and escape. He would definitely not waste any more time here. However, the witch of Black Mountain made a mistake. That was, her vines could not trap Gohan for even a second. Suddenly, more than 10 streams of sword chi came down from the sky, and all the vines of the witch of Black Mountain were instantly destroyed by these sword chi. A woman in white slowly floated down from the sky, looking at the witch of Black Mountain with disdain. She was not even interested in talking to her. "Connate Cardinal Treasure! Connate Cardinal Treasure!" Seeing this woman, the old witch of the Black Mountain was shocked. Although she did not know the immortal extinguishing sword, she knew the aura of the primordial treasure. The old witch of the Black Mountain never expected that a primordial treasure would appear in front of her. "Run!" The witch of Black Mountain completely lost the desire to fight and began to flee desperately. At the same time, 2 immortal sword-level sword holders jumped out of the void and surrounded the witch of Black Mountain from this direction. How could the witch of Black Mountain be a match for the immortal extinguishing sword and the other 2 people? The fight between the 2 sides lasted for less than 20 minutes. The dignified universe-level Yuan Ko used up all the demon power in his body and was captured alive by the immortal extinguishing sword. The reason why it took 20 minutes was that Gohan did not attack at all. Otherwise, the witch of Black Mountain would be dead in 5 minutes at most. "Ah, I can finally move my muscles and bones. It's so comfortable." The immortal extinguishing sword, together with Song Yifei and Lu Shihua, threw the witch of Black Mountain, who had lost all her power, in front of Gohan. The witch of Black Mountain looked at Gohan with a face full of annoyance and said, "I didn't expect that I would be bitten by the goose after hunting for so long. But I don't understand. I have clearly checked the surrounding void. How did your people hide from me?" "You don't need to know the answer to this question," Gohan said coldly. The reason why the witch of Black Mountain did not notice them was that Gohan, who had already changed the rules of the void, had hidden Song Yifei and the others. Unless the witch of Black Mountain was a primeval existence, it would be impossible for him to find out Gohan's concealment. The witch of Black Mountain had done many evil things, and Gohan did not intend to let him know the reason before he died. It would be best to let him die with curiosity and confusion. "Chinpin, bring me poor one." Gohan turned his head and said. Then, a little girl jumped out of Gohan's scabbard, and at the same time, she was dragging a green elf-like creature in her hand. This little guy was Poor One. According to the 3 Poor One, Green Poor One was a plant, which was a good match for a top tree demon like the Witch of Black Mountain. "What do you want to do?" Looking at Yi Chang, who was dying of hunger, the Witch of Black Mountain suddenly had an ominous premonition. However, the Witch of the Black Mountain had no ability to resist at all. In the next second, her body was cut open by the sword of exterminating immortals, revealing a green demon core hidden deep in the tree trunk. Qing Jian carefully placed a finger on the demon core. Yi Chang, who was on the verge of death just now, instantly jumped up and bit the green demon core of old Witch of Black Mountain. No. The Witch of Black Mountain let out a desperate cry, trying her best to drive poor one out of her monster core. But Juexian casually pointed between the Witch of Black Mountain's eyebrows, and the Witch of Black Mountain completely lost the ability to resist, letting poor one greedily absorb the power in her monster core. In the end, the monster core of the Witch of Black Mountain became smaller and smaller, and her originally majestic body became more and more withered. Finally, from a towering tree to a withered dead wood, poor one's body gradually became plump. Finally, with a burp, her body completely turned into a green gem. It's done. Gohan breathed a sigh of relief and held the gem in his hand. At this time, the monster core of the Witch of Black Mountain was only the size of a fingernail. But Gohan did not intend to give up the remaining value of the Witch of Black Mountain. Gohan nodded to Song Yifei and Lu Shihua, and the two of them held their swords at the same time and pierced the last bit of the monster core of the Witch of Black Mountain. The Witch of Black Mountain let out a last unwilling roar and finally died completely. A dimensional vortex appeared. Miss Yifei, you go first. I'm not in a hurry. Lu Shihua took the initiative to say. No, you go first. You're almost there. You only need 100,000 quarks. I still need 5 million quarks. You should get enough first. Song Yifei modestly declined, and Lu Shihua also modestly declined. The two of them pushed for a while, and the dimensional vortex was about to disappear completely. Let's do it together, Gohan said very straightforwardly. Lu Shihua and Song Yifei sent their sword hilts into the dimensional vortex at the same time, and divided the last bit of the remaining value of the Witch of Black Mountain. Gohan, what should we do with this woman? After getting rid of the Witch of Black Mountain, Song Yifei asked Nie Shaoqian, who was in rags. Kill her. Gohan answered very straightforwardly. Such a beautiful Yuan Ko? Wouldn't it be a pity to kill her? Song Yifei said wickedly. Yes, yes. Don't kill me. I'm innocent. I'm a good. Before Nie Shaoqian, who was begging for mercy in a hurry, could finish her words, she was pierced by a long sword, turned into a ghost, and entered the dimensional vortex. Master is right. Kill her. Lu Shihua put away his sword neatly, and he no longer had the kind and benevolent temperament of a living bodhisattva. How much sword essence did the two of you absorb? After the dimensional vortex disappeared completely, Gohan asked curiously. I got 150,000 quarks. Lu Shihua replied. I got 200,000 quarks. Song Yifei continued to answer. In other words, it's a total of 350,000 quarks. A normal U-grade Yuan Ko should have about 1 million sword essence now. It seems that after this Witch of Black Mountain's monster core was absorbed again, the sword essence contained in the dimensional vortex has also been greatly reduced. Gohan said thoughtfully, then glanced at the green gem in his hand and smiled. This girl actually wasted 700,000 quarks of mine. I must find her to make up for it in the future. Master, the sword essence in my body has reached 10 million quarks. After examining his purple mansion, Lu Shihua immediately said to Gohan excitedly. The sword essence in his body had reached 10 million, which meant that Lu Shihua had reached the rigid standard of an Emperor sword wielder. It's good that you've reached it. Gohan nodded. In that case, don't absorb the dimensional vortex in the future. Let's first rush Yifei's and my sword essence up. What? Gohan, you haven't reached 10 million quarks? Song Yifei asked curiously when he heard Gohan say that. Useless. I've been staying in the seamless corridor for the past 20 years. Where can I get quarks? Guhan rolled his eyes at Song Yifei. Then how many quarks of sword essence do you have now? Do you have 5 million? Song Yifei asked again. Not as much as you. Just over 3 million. Guhan saw through Song Yifei's thoughts and said calmly. Ha 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 ha. Guhan, you're not as good as me. Ha. Song Yifei was so happy that his whole body was blooming with laughter. In the following period of time, the Yuan Ko with different attributes and above were unlucky. In order to gather 10 million quarks of sword essence from Song Yifei, Lu Shihua, and himself within a month so that they could return before Yuzhang City was breached, Guhan began to look for these Yuan Ko and kill them. In order to speed up the process, Guhan did not look for those Yuan Ko who were not famous or strong. Instead, he specifically looked for those who were strong, famous, and had their lair known to humans. In an instant, the entire Yuan Ko circle was in a state of panic. In the short span of 10 days, 7 to 8 strong universe-level Yuan Ko were killed. Among them, there were 3 universe-level Yuan Ko. According to some speculations, none of these Yuan Ko could resist for more than an hour. They did not even have the chance to escape through the void. One had to know that even if an Emperor's sword wielder attacked, no matter how weak a universe-level Yuan Ko was, as long as they reacted fast enough, they could escape through the void. Even if they could not escape with their lives, it would not be a problem to escape for 7 to 8 days. How could it be like this, where he was easily killed by his opponent? Therefore, some of the Yuan Ko decided to form a group and find 2 or 3 good friends to live together. They felt that this way they could resist the killing. However, they did not know that this was just a way for Guhan to gather sword essence faster. At this time, in the depths of a mountain in the original Gansu province, 2 universe-level Yuan Ko and 1 universe-level Yuan Ko had completely lost their ability to resist. They were trapped in a deep pit that had turned into scorched earth. These 3 Yuan Ko were super strong warriors that shook the entire Gansu province. They thought that the 3 of them would be able to avoid the disaster by gathering together, but they were all captured alive in the end. I finally found a lightning attribute Yuan Ko. If I was 1 or 2 days late, the 7 poor wouldn't have been able to hold on. After sucking dry a Norse god named Thor, the last 7 paupers finally transformed into a gemstone. Thus, all 6 of them successfully transformed into gemstones, and it was considered that they had escaped death. After killing Thor and the other Yuan Ko and obtaining the sword essence from the dimensional whirlpool, Guhan and Song Yifei had also gathered 10 million quarks of sword essence, reaching the standard of an emperor's sword wielder. Just as Guhan was about to end the life of the last Yuan Ko, this Yuan Ko's eyes turned red. While Lu Shihua, who was controlling him, was distracted, he exploded the godhood in his body. The huge explosion flattened the entire mountain. If not for Guhan's timely reaction and bringing everyone into the void, Song Yifei and Lu Shihua would have been in serious trouble. However, this explosion was not completely without gain. After the explosion, Guhan made a shocking discovery. Chapter 1485. I didn't expect there to be a dimensional mark here. The consequences of a Yun-class Yuan Ko's self-destruction were terrifying. The dimensional wall at the core of the explosion was actually torn apart, revealing a huge dimensional crack. On the other side of the crack was a dimensional space. However, what surprised Guhan was that he could actually see a colorful thread at the opening of the crack, extending into the depths of the dimensional space. This wasn't the first time Guhan had seen such a colorful thread. 20 years ago, when Guhan had been led by Liu Bei and the others to the Martyr's Palace's headquarters, he had found the hidden Martyr's Palace's headquarters through this thread. In fact, this was not a thread, but a special mark. By following this mark, one would be able to find some secrets hidden in the dimensional space. At the same time, by following this mark, one would be able to successfully return to the real world without the danger of getting lost in the dimensional space. It seems like this is a gateway used by a major Yuan co-faction to enter and exit our world. That's why the dimensional wall here is very weak and was blasted apart by a Yun-class Yuan Ko's self-destruction. Gohan observed carefully and said thoughtfully, "Which Yuan co-faction's lair does this dimensional mark lead to?" Lu Shihua asked curiously. "I don't know." Gohan shook his head. "Unless we follow the mark and enter the dimensional space, we won't be able to find out which Yuan co-faction's lair it is." "Then let's go in and find it," Song Yifei immediately said excitedly. "No." Gohan refused without hesitation. The reason was simple. It had been 25 days since Yuzhang City had been surrounded, and the situation there had to be worsening by the day. Song Yifei and Lu Shihua had already obtained 10 million quarks of sword essence. Their top priority now was to bring them back to Mingyuan City and help Song Yifei ascend the throne. Then, they would go to Yuzhang City to find Lu Shihua's 12-winged angel sword. This was what Gohan wanted to do urgently. As for this dimensional mark, it wouldn't disappear for a while, so he could investigate it later. Even if it disappeared, it was not a big deal. It was not on the same level as the safety of mankind. Alright. Hearing Gohan's decision, Song Yifei was a little disappointed. At the same time, he muttered to himself thoughtfully, "This is such a coincidence. The places where these 3 Yuan Kos gather happen to be where the dimensional mark is. This is too much of a coincidence." The speaker did not mean it, but the listener did. Song Yifei's unintentional remark made Gohan's heart skip a beat. "That's right, isn't it too much of a coincidence?" "No, this definitely isn't a coincidence. There must be some inevitable factors involved." Gohan rubbed his nose as he pondered. "During the battle, I discovered that there were many defensive measures built here. These measures were definitely not built in a hurry. They must have been built over a long period of time. In other words, this location should be the base of one of the 3 Yuan Kos. It's because this place is well equipped that the 3 Yuan Kos chose to hide here. If that's the case, the dimensional mark was built in the base of a U-level Yuan Kos. Who would believe that this Yuan Ko has nothing to do with the Yuan Ko's force behind this dimensional mark? This Yuan Ko must be one of the representatives of that force in the human world. That's why they gradually built the mark in their base to protect the headquarters. Thinking up to this point, Gohan immediately pulled up all the information on the 3 Yuan Kos that had just died. He found out that the area around this area was mainly occupied by a U-level Yuan Ko named Xiaolinger. This Xiaolinger wasn't a fierce Yuan Ko. Unless humans took the initiative to enter his territory, he rarely took the initiative to attack humans. His relationship with humans was quite good, and humans never took the initiative to attack Xiaolinger. If it wasn't for the 3 Yuan Kos huddling together, Gohan wouldn't have taken the initiative to find trouble with this Yuan Ko. However, it just so happened that Thunder God Thor was one of the 3 Yuan Kos, so Gohan had to kill his way here and kill Xiaolinger along the way. Now that he thought about it, although Xiaolinger was indeed a U-level Yuan Kos, her real strength was terrible. She was the first Yuan Ko that Gohan killed. Her real strength was probably the worst U-level Yuan Kos that Gohan had ever seen. There's something wrong with this Xiaolinger. Gohan thought about it and felt that something was wrong. He began to search for information on Xiaolinger on the personal terminal. However, this Xiaolinger was too low-key, and humans had too little information on her. Other than knowing that Xiaolinger appeared in this place 400 years ago and had a docile personality, he couldn't find any valuable information on her. Yifei, does Mingyuan City know anything about this Xiaolinger? Gohan saw that he couldn't find any clues in the human's information, so he turned to Song Yifei and asked. The contact between Mingyuan City and Yuan Kos was completely different from the contact between humans, so there might be some valuable information in Mingyuan City. Xiaolinger, this name sounds familiar. Sure enough, Gohan had asked the right question. Song Yifei thought for a moment and said, I remember now. More than 10 years ago, this Qiao Linger seemed to have come to Mingyuan City. At that time, a human consigned a set of red sandalwood prayer beads to us, and this Qiao Linger bought it at a high price. At that time, I thought it was a little strange. Humans had long stopped believing in Buddhism, and only those Yuan Ko who believed in Buddhism were interested in the prayer bead. However, with the disappearance of Spirited Mountain, the number of Yuan Ko who believed in Buddhism decreased greatly. I originally thought that the prayer beads wouldn't be sold for 10 or 20 years, but it was only on the shelf for 2 days, and Qiao Linger bought it at a high price. I saw that he was dressed in white, and he had 2 beautiful maids with him. He looked like an elegant young master, but no matter how I looked at him, he didn't look like a Buddhist Yuan Ko. Song Yifei recalled with a strange expression. By the way, I've seen the account books of Mingyuan City. This Qiao Linger is considered a regular customer of Mingyuan City. He has come to Mingyuan City more than 20 times, and every time, he just bought something and left. He can be considered a loyal customer. Song Yifei smiled and said, "Strange. If he is an elegant young master, why is he in such a hurry to buy a string of prayer beads? Also, if he has nothing to do with the world, why does he come here so often?" Gu Han was confused as well. After thinking for a while, she suddenly asked Song Yifei, "Yifei, do you know the origin of the red sandalwood prayer beads?" "Hey, you've asked the right person. Others might not know, but I'm the only one who knows." Song Yifei chuckled. "The human smuggler who sold the prayer beads was also received by me, and we have a good relationship. I asked him about it out of curiosity, and he told me that it was not an ordinary prayer bead, but a prayer bead that was found on the battlefield in the Alps mountains. It was said that the prayer beads were the beads that were hanging on the wrist of the desolate level Yuan Ko Vairocana. In the end, it was scattered by a sword that came from the sky. A sword-bearer had a sudden idea, and it took him a lot of effort to pick up 18 prayer bead. He then pieced them together and passed them down as a family heirloom. Later on, the sword-bearer's family declined, and in order to make a living, his descendants sold the prayer beads to a merchant, who then sold them in Mingyuan City. Then it makes sense. Gohan nodded thoughtfully, and a look of understanding appeared on his face. Now I know where the dimensional mark leads to. Where does it lead to? Song Yifei immediately asked curiously. It leads to the spiritual mountain, which is the lair where Vairocana cultivates. Gohan sneered. I've read in a book that the cultivation of Buddhism is particular about the power of wish, and the power of wish likes to be attached to personal items such as prayer bead. Vairocana was seriously injured, and if he wanted to recover, he would definitely need a lot of power of wish. The prayer beads that he used before must contain a lot of power of wish, which is just right for Vairocana to recover. And this Qiao Linger must be a chess piece that Vairocana has hidden in the world. She's a chess piece used to collect all sorts of resources to help him recuperate. That's why there's a dimensional mark in his lair that leads directly to the spiritual mountain. There's no mistake, the other side of this dimensional mark is the spiritual mountain. Oh, now that you mention it, it might really be the spiritual mountain behind this line. Song Yifei agreed. But Master, that's not what we heard from Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. Didn't Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva say that? As long as you look at the place where the first ray of dawn appears when the sun rises every day, you will be able to find the dimensional mark that leads to the spiritual mountain. This place is located in the far west. Where does the morning glow come from? Lu Shihua immediately asked in confusion as he recalled the encounter between him and his master. Didn't I tell you that? Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva is not worthy of our trust. Only he knows whether the road he leads to the spiritual mountain or hell. Gohan sneered. Forget it, why do we care so much? Let's go back to Mingyuan City first. I can't wait to become the emperor. Ha ha, Gohan, no matter how powerful you are, so what? I'm still one step faster than you. Song Yifei laughed proudly. No. I changed my mind. To Song Yifei's chuckle, Guhan immediately changed his mind. Let's not go back to Mingyuan City. Let's go to the spiritual mountain first. Chapter 1486. Why did Gu Han change his original plan? Why did he put Yuzhang City in danger? Why did he take the risk to enter Mount Lingshan with an uncertain future? The reason was simple. Gu Han also wanted to ascend the throne and become an emperor. If Gu Han wanted to become an emperor, he could not do without the celestial trapping sword, the last sword lady of the 4 celestial swords. In fact, Gu Han did not need to look for his emperor's sword lady. The moment Gu Han became a celestial sword wielder, Gu Han already knew where his emperor's sword lady was. Because of the yin-yang sword technique, Gu Han had to have 2 matching emperor's sword ladies. Such a sword lady was hard to find. As far as Gu Han knew, among all the emperor's sword ladies, there were no matching sword ladies. However, after knowing the origins of the 4 celestial swords and the Xianyuan sword, Gu Han knew which emperor's sword lady he should choose. Previously, it was said that the 4 celestial swords and the Xianyuan sword had the same origin. They were both Khanate cardinal treasures that had fallen from Pangu's body. Therefore, the Xianyuan sword and the 4 celestial swords were compatible. Even if the Xianyuan sword and the celestial extinguishing sword were unwilling to admit this, they could not deny it. In the end, under Gu Han's interrogation, they could only admit that they could be called sisters. The Xianyuan sword was already an emperor's sword lady. As for the 4 celestial swords, the celestial trapping sword had not been synchronized. Coincidentally, there were 2 sword ladies. These were the only 2 sword ladies that Gu Han could synchronize. As for the celestial trapping sword's grade, according to the celestial sword, they were all top-notch emperor's sword ladies. However, due to the battle with sect leader Tong Tian, their origin had been damaged. As a result, the celestial trapping sword and the celestial extinguishing sword had become spirit swords, while the celestial trapping sword had become immortal swords. The celestial trapping sword had lost all its power and became an ordinary ancient sword lady. However, if the power of the celestial trapping sword could be restored, it could return to the emperor's sword level. There was only one way to restore the celestial trapping sword. It was to inject a large amount of chaotic origin power into the celestial trapping sword. Like charging a battery, the celestial trapping sword would be fully charged again. At that moment, the only 2 people in the world who could use the chaotic origin power were the Jade Emperor of the Heavenly Court and Mahavairocana of the Spirited Mountain. Gu Han did not have the guts to wander around the Heavenly Court for the time being. There were too many primordial Yuan Ko. Even Zhejiandi managed to make a mess in the Heavenly Court and even killed many powerful Yuan Ko. Zhejiandi could only escape from the Heavenly Court in a sorry state. After that, he never entered the Heavenly Court again. Therefore, before Gu Han was sure that he could have Zhejiandi's power, Gu Han did not plan to take the risk in the Heavenly Court. The remaining one, Mahavairocana, who had been bullied by dogs, was the best choice. If Mahavairocana could really restore the celestial trapping sword, Gu Han, who also had 10 million quarks of sword elements, could also ascend to the throne in an instant. To put it bluntly, once Gu Han ascended to the throne, his combat strength would increase by at least 10 Song Yifei's combat strength. As long as Gu Han could ascend to the throne, Gu Han was confident that he could expel all the 12 Zhu Wus by himself. At the very least, humans could have a safe city again. Considering that Yuzhang City should be able to hold on for another 10 days, Gu Han gritted his teeth and changed his mind in an instant. He decided to take all his people into the Spirited Mountain, find Mahavairocana, who was still recuperating, and force him to restore his celestial trapping sword. Gu Han's decision was very firm, and Lu Shihua would never object to Gu Han's decision. Song Yifei could not dissuade both of them, so the three of them entered the dimensional world together. They followed the colored markings all the way forward. After flying in the dimensional space for a long time, they finally saw a tall and majestic mountain standing in the depths of the dimensional space. A faint golden light enveloped the mountain, making it look like a Buddha. This must be the legendary spirited mountain. Song Yifei, who was the most curious, was the first to stand on the land of the spirited mountain, followed by Gohan and Lu Shihua. The moment Gohan landed, Gohan released the celestial extinguish sword, the celestial slaying sword, and the celestial slaughtering sword at the same time. As for the other sword ladies, Gohan still kept them in their scabbards. The reason was very simple. The reason why Gohan released the three sword ladies was that they were very familiar with the spirited mountain. They could lead the way for him, and at the same time, avoid some dangers in the spirited mountain. As for the other sword ladies, in fact, it was not a big deal to release them. However, once there were too many of them, it was easy to cause trouble. Now that they were in this dimensional space that could be dangerous at any time, Gohan had to be cautious and try his best to eliminate all possible dangers. This is the spirited mountain. I can't believe I can see it again. How nostalgic! The celestial extinguish sword said with emotion. The celestial slaying sword and the celestial slaughtering sword looked at the scenery of the spirited mountain with nostalgic expressions. This should be the reception area of the spirited mountain. It is also the mountain gate of the spirited mountain. Back then, even the most powerful immortal, even if the Jade Emperor came in person, would obediently land at this reception area and walk up the spirited mountain step by step. Don't even think about flying. This is the right that only sages have. The celestial extinguishing sword looked at the surrounding environment and said. Gohan also looked carefully and found that there was indeed a huge stone tablet in front of him. On it, he could vaguely see the words "Welcome Guest." In addition, in the depths of the stone tablet, he could vaguely see a tall building with a few floors. On both sides of the stone tablet there were two huge doors. On each door there was a pair of couplets that were written with unknown materials. The first couplet was, 100 feet into the sky, a towering man soars in the sky. Lowering one's head to watch the setting sun, stretching one's hand to pluck the flying stars. The open-minded windows store the universe, the rugged buildings connect the screen. The second couplet was, talking about Tao in the true hall, the universe imparts scriptures. The flowers are beautiful in spring, the pines are green in the face of rain. The purple Ganoderma immortal fruit is young and beautiful, the elixir wind is elegant, and all senses are spiritual. This couplet is quite arrogant. However, since this is a place second only to sages, it's not too much to use this couplet. Gohan sneered and said with some disdain. However, there was no doubt that this was the mountain gate of the spirited mountain. He had indeed arrived at the spirited mountain. However, he did not know whether Vairocana was still cultivating on the spirited mountain. What's that? After everyone walked past the stone tablet, Lu Shihua suddenly pointed to a place behind the stone tablet and said with some panic. Gohan looked at where Lu Shihua was pointing and found that there was a skeleton sitting behind the stone tablet. This skeleton was wearing a light yellow kasaya. The kasaya itself seemed to be an incredible treasure. Even at this time, it was still as clean as new and emitted a dazzling light. However, the owner of the kasaya had already become a skeleton. Seeing Lu Shihua being a little frightened by the skeleton, Gohan could not help but smile in his heart. One should know that not long ago Lu Shihua was just a skeleton. Even the bones of a skeleton were not complete. He looked much more terrifying than this skeleton. Hey, there's also a skeleton here. Song Yifei quickly found another skeleton directly opposite the skeleton. Both skeletons were sitting cross-legged on the ground. From the position of the two skeletons, it seemed that they were guarding the main road to the reception area. This is the welcoming monk of the spirited mountain. Celestial Extinguish Sword and Celestial Extermination Sword carefully observed the two skeletons and said, "Look at the skull of this skeleton. There are 3 ring scars on it." The monks of the Spirited Mountain are divided into 9 classes according to the number of ring scars on their heads. The 3rd class of monks is the welcoming monk of the mountain gate. Because they are guarding the gate, they are very proud, so they can wear the purple gold kasaya that only bodhisattvas can wear. Otherwise, even the ordinary Vajra Arhat can only wear a yellow monk's robe. Isn't this spiritual mountain a little too prideful? Song Yifei was a little shocked by what Celestial Extermination Sword said. I remember that the remaining books said that the monks are the most proud. Was this monk the one who cared the least about money and treasures in the world, and the least about face? Was it a simple religion? Why would they do such a stupid thing? Who told you that the monks don't care about money and treasures? Don't they care about their face? Celestial Extermination Sword rolled its eyes at Song Yifei and said, "If the monks don't care about money and treasures, why would they put a merit box and let people donate money and so on? If the monks don't care about their face, why would they make a golden Buddha statue, and it has to be made of pure gold? Let me tell you, the monks in this world are the most hypocritical. They obviously covet the best things in the world, but they still advise others not to covet these things. This is the most hypocritical and despicable thing." Celestial Extermination Sword. Be careful with your words. Celestial Extermination Sword's words made Celestial Extermination Sword frown. Is there a need to be careful with my words? Celestial Extermination Sword looked at its sister with dissatisfaction, and said, "Of course, we don't know whether the 2 saints of the Western Paradise are dead or alive. If they are still alive like Lord Taishang Laojun, then you should be careful that the 2 of them will find you and pay you back for what you said today." Celestial Extermination Sword said lightly, "That's enough. I won't say anything." Celestial Extermination Sword stuck out its tongue and actually admitted defeat. After that, everyone walked along the main road of the Spirited Mountain. The main road of the Spirited Mountain was extremely long. They walked for hundreds of kilometers, but they still didn't reach 1/4 of the height. What made Gohan even more surprised was that there were skeletons sitting on the ground everywhere on the Spirited Mountain. If someone who didn't know the details came here and saw everything in front of them, they would only think that this was some kind of hell on earth. How would they know that this was actually the legendary Western Paradise, the Spirited Mountain Great Thunder Sound Temple with great freedom and happiness? Chapter 1487. TSK, what happened here? If Zhuanti and Jane were to come back and see their beloved Spirited Mountain in such a state, they would probably be so angry that they would vomit blood. Along the way, Gohan and the others saw at least thousands of corpses of monks. These were just the corpses that appeared on the 2 sides of the road. In the temples and forests further away, there were probably more corpses of monks. A rough estimate showed that there were more than 1,000,000 corpses on Spirited Mountain. After understanding this point, the Extinguish Immortal Sword couldn't help but say what it said above. This was indeed the truth. Spirited Mountain was a holy land of Buddhism built by Zhuanti and Jane after many years of painstaking effort. Every monk in it was a devout believer of Buddhism and could be said to be a pillar of strength. In the end, all these monks died in Spirited Mountain. While the Celestial Slashing Sword was mocking him, it could not help but feel a little fearful. Who was it that had the ability to kill all the monks on Spirited Mountain? Gohan, did you humans do this back then? During the Battle of Alps? Extinguish Immortal Sword poked Gohan's shoulder and asked. Absolutely not. Gohan denied with certainty. Back then, humans were in a state of defense all the time. These bald donkeys on Spirited Mountain attacked hysterically. How could we humans have the ability to fight our way to Spirited Mountain? I can guarantee that no human has ever entered Spirited Mountain, let alone killed all the monks on Spirited Mountain. That's strange. Now that spirited mountain has hidden in a hidden place like the dimensional space, what kind of deity killed all these monks? Celestial Extinguishing Sword said with a strange expression on his face. It's not that simple. Extinguish Immortal Sword carefully examined the corpses of these monks and said, although these monks' skin and flesh are gone, judging from their bones, they definitely did not resist before they died. They died in a rather peaceful, and even somewhat happy situation. The simplest point is that if they really died from an enemy invasion, unless this enemy could kill all the monks overnight, these monks' corpses would not be so naturally distributed in different places on Spirited Mountain. They were obviously killed in their daily lives. Well, I have another question. If this Yuan Ko died in the dimensional space, wouldn't his corpse be absorbed by the dimensional whirlpool? On Earth, the dead Yuan Ko can't even be found with a bit of bone powder. Song Yifei said doubtfully. This. Gohan hesitated. Gohan was not too sure about this because Gohan had never killed any Yuan Ko in the dimensional space. And that Xiao Ling Lu Shihua also began to analyze. That Xiao Ling bought things for Virokana to cultivate a few years ago, so he should be here often. And these corpses look at least 100 years old. It's impossible for Xiao Ling not to see these corpses. Obviously, he has long been used to the existence of these corpses, and that Virokana must still be alive. That's right. The answers to all the questions are in the Great Lane Temple. As long as we enter the Great Lane Temple and find Virokana, we should be able to find some answers. I don't believe that this desolate level Yuan Ko died so easily. Gohan's last sentence ended everyone's discussion. Everyone began to silently walk toward the Great Lane Temple at the top of the mountain. After walking for about a day, everyone finally passed the cloud-soaring crossing. Once they came out of the cloud-soaring crossing, the gate of the Great Lane Temple appeared in front of everyone. This place is really declining. Just like the corpses they saw on the mountain road, the once magnificent and extraordinary Great Lane Temple had actually become quiet. Although the building was still towering, the stubborn weeds that grew in the cracks of the building showed that this place had long been in decline. If it wasn't for the Great Lane Temple's signboard, no one would believe that this was a Buddhist holy land and the place where Buddha resided. Strange, this Great Lane Temple is a building enveloped by the power of will. How can ordinary weeds grow here? This is unbelievable. The Celestial Extinguished Sword looked at the weeds on the ground and said in disbelief. Clearly, in the Celestial Extinguished Sword's subconscious, even the appearance of a weed in the Great Lane Temple was unimaginable. Let's go in and take a look. Gohan didn't care about the weeds and led everyone directly into the Great Lane Temple. The Great Lane Temple was very magnificent and the complexity was even greater than the palace. There were all kinds of Buddhist halls and nunneries everywhere. If it wasn't for the Celestial Extinguished Sword and the Celestial Extinguished Sword's familiarity with the Great Lane Temple, they might not have been able to find the Great Buddha's Hall, which was also the place where Mahavirokana sat. We're here. This is the Great Buddha's Hall of the Great Buddha's Hall. After a few turns, they finally arrived at an ordinary-looking hall. This hall seemed to be no different from the other halls around it. If it wasn't for the Celestial Extinguished Sword telling them that this was the core of the Great Buddha's Hall of the Great Buddha's Hall, they would definitely not believe it. Do you guys think that Mahavirokana is already dead? After all, there are skeletons everywhere in this spirited mountain. There won't be many skeletons like Mahavirokana, Song Yifei said wickedly. Indeed, even if Mahavirokana isn't dead, he must still be seriously injured. With so many of us suddenly barging in, Mahavirokana might have secretly hidden himself. I think it'll be very difficult for us to find him, the Celestial Extinguished Sword said. Why do you two have so much nonsense to say? Won't we know once we go in and have a look? Gohan glared at the two guys, and then directly pushed open the dusty door of the Great Buddha's Hall. Then, A melodious sound of a wooden fish floated out from the depths of the great Buddha's hall and entered everyone's ears. "There's someone in the great Buddha's hall." Everyone was shocked, and at this time, the sound of the wooden fish stopped abruptly. A somewhat deep voice said, "Those who come from afar are guests. Since you have come to my small spirited mountain, why don't you come in and have a chat?" This is the voice of Mahavairocana. This is the voice of Mahavairocana. Yes, I will never forget this voice for the rest of my life. The celestial extinguished sword said immediately. It seemed that Mahavairocana was indeed still alive. This also made Gohan heave a sigh of relief. If Mahavairocana was dead, where could Gohan find someone to repair the celestial invading sword? Chapter 1488. Although there were few statues or portraits of Vairocana Buddha in the human world, there were many images of Vairocana Buddha in other dimensional world. Countless portraits and sculptures told people that Vairocana Buddha was a fat monk with big ears, a sincere body, a serene face, and a dozen rows of bulges on his head. He always had a kind smile on his face. However, when people saw Vairocana Buddha with their own eyes, they were surprised to find that the legendary master of Buddhism was actually a skinny old man. He was so skinny that he looked like a bag of bones. He didn't look fat at all. If someone said that this guy was Vairocana, no one would be willing to believe it at first glance. "Please sit on the ground. I'm sorry I can't move, so I can't entertain you," Vairocana Buddha said faintly. At this time, Song Yifei also noticed that Vairocana Buddha was holding a string of Buddha beads in his hand. He immediately whispered to Gohan, "This string of Buddha beads is the one I sold to Qiao Linger. I can't be wrong." Vairocana Buddha seemed to have heard Song Yifei's words. He frowned and said, "Since you came to my spirited mountain from Qiao Linger's place, but Linger didn't come with you, he must have died in your hands." Clang! Hearing Vairocana's words, everyone immediately entered a state of alert, their weapons aimed at Vairocana. As long as Vairocana Buddha showed any signs of preparing to attack, their attacks would fall on Vairocana Buddha without hesitation. Benefactors, there's no need to panic. Ling Er's death is nothing more than returning to the real Western Pure Land of ultimate bliss. Compared to me, Ling Er can be considered to be quite lucky. Mahavairocana said, "I didn't expect you to be so open-minded. Everyone, put away your weapons. We're not here to fight." Gohan nodded to everyone. Then, everyone put away their weapons. The Mahavira Buddha's hall regained some peace. "You must be joking. The world is so complicated. Even I have a lot of things that I can't get over. If I could really let go of everything, I wouldn't have fallen to this state today." Suddenly, Mahavairocana let out a carefree laugh as a divine radiance appeared. At this moment, Mahavairocana had really recovered some of the bearing of a Buddha. "Buddha, have you thought it through now?" Gohan did not care about the dust that had accumulated on the ground. He sat down and looked at Vairocana. "I've thought through some things, that's all." Mahavairocana waved his shriveled bone-like right hand, which was still in a lotus shape, and said, "Benefactor, since you've come here, just tell me your purpose." "All right, then I'll be straightforward." Gohan nodded. He took out his immortal trapping sword and said, "I only came here with one request. I hope that Ancestral Buddha can use your Chaos Force to repair my immortal trapping sword. I would be extremely grateful. In the future, as long as Buddha doesn't do anything harmful to us humans, I can guarantee that I won't disturb Buddha's peace. At the same time, I will also forbid others from disturbing Buddha's peace. The grudges between us humans and the spirited mountain will be written off. Is that all right with you, Ancestral Buddha?" After Gohan said this, Lu Shihua looked at Gohan in astonishment. In the Battle of the Alps, more than half of the sword-bearers had died. They had never suffered such a great loss before, apart from the appearance of the 12 grand shamans and the early days of the Great Calamity when they were at the mercy of others. Mahavairocana was a name that had never changed on the humans' wanted list. He had even occupied the first place for 300 years. Even though his name had been replaced by another Yuan Ko, Mahavairocana's name remained in second place. He was an existence that everyone wanted to kill. Guhan had actually written off the grudges between humans and Mahavairocana with just a few words. From this, it could be seen that Guhan had unavoidably used the suffering of humans as a bargaining chip. Taking a step back, did Guhan really have the ability to make such a promise on behalf of humans? Thinking of this, Lu Shihua could not help but fall silent. She felt that her master had made a mistake and should not have made such a promise. However, she did not dare to reprimand her master either. She could only lower her head in silence. Sounds great. The ancestral Buddha smiled faintly. However, this isn't what I want. Why don't we change the condition? What condition? Guhan narrowed his eyes. If you can send me back to the Pure Land, I will help you repair the immortal trapping sword. Mahavairocana said something that left even Guhan at a loss. There were two possible answers to sending Mahavairocana back to the Pure Land. One was to send Mahavairocana back to the Western Pure Land. However, the problem was that the Spirited Mountain was already the Western Pure Land. How could there be a Western Pure Land to send Mahavairocana back to? The second was the traditional answer to return to the Pure Land, which was to kill Mahavairocana. That was even stranger. Why would someone use killing him as a condition for a deal? Isn't this the Western Pure Land? Guhan suddenly said after thinking for a while. There are bones everywhere here. This is not the Western Pure Land. Then how should I send ancestral Buddha to the Western Pure Land? One sword will suffice. Benefactor, you are also happy. Mahavairocana laughed. This Mahavairocana wanted Guhan to kill him. In that case, please help me repair the immortal trapping sword first, and I will send you on your way. No, benefactor, send me back to the Pure Land first, and I will help you. F***CK. You stinky monk, stinky Yuan Ko, are you out of your mind? If we kill you, where can you go to help us? Hearing the conversation between Guhan and Mahavairocana, Song Yifei was so angry that his eyebrows were raised. This was the funniest joke in the world. Not to mention asking others to kill him. If he really killed Guhan first, why would they come to find him? That's not it, don't be rude. Guhan glared at Song Yifei, and Song Yifei shrank back unwillingly. Guhan stared at Mahavairocana for a long time before saying, Ancestral Buddha, I, Guhan, am not a smart person, and I don't want to beat around the bush with you. If you need me to do anything, just tell me. As long as I think I can do it, I will do it. Sigh. Benefactor, you still lack some wisdom. Mahavairocana sighed slightly, and then a happy expression appeared on his face. However, your remaining wisdom is indeed enough to be a monk. If you are willing, I am willing to accept you as a disciple on behalf of my master, and we can be a pair of Buddhist brothers. How about that? What the hell? Everyone was stunned. It was not that they were not smart enough, but the world was changing too fast. Chapter 1489. You want me to be a monk? Guhan looked at Vairocana with a playful gaze. Then, he nodded and smiled, ignoring the opposing gazes of the women around him. That's fine too. As long as you can help me repair the immortal trapping sword, I'll become a monk. No, benefactor, you have to be a monk first. Only then can I save the immortal trapping sword. Vairocana shook his head and said resolutely. Really? Guhan's expression changed slightly. Didn't the Buddha say that I would only be willing to repair my sword lady after I kill him? Why did you change your mind now? Did I change my mind? Vairocana smiled. I have never changed my words. This is the same thing. Little friend, you just have to enter my Buddhism. Guhan, this guy is just fooling you. Don't fall for it. Song Yifei tugged at Guhan's sleeve and said nervously. Although monks were rare after the Great Calamity, Song Yifei had a general understanding of some of the rules of Buddhism. In particular, she knew that one of the rules of Buddhism was that monks were not allowed to eat meat, marry and have children. Therefore, Song Yifei was very nervous. She was afraid that Gohan would agree to Vairocana's request and become a monk. Don't panic, benefactor. Buddhism did have such rules in the past. However, after the Celestial Empire, the rules of Buddhism have changed. According to the rules of the Celestial Empire, monks are also allowed to eat meat, marry and have children. These are all allowed. Benefactor, you don't have to worry about these trivial matters. Vairocana laughed loudly. What the hell is this? Song Yifei looked at Gohan in confusion. Gohan nodded. After living in another dimension for 5 years, Gohan had a very good understanding of things before the Great Calamity. Before the Celestial Empire, monks indeed had many rules. They were definitely not allowed to marry and have children. However, in the Celestial Empire, these rules were completely shattered like dregs in front of the Celestial Empire. The monks of the Celestial Empire are more like a profession. Not only can they eat meat, but they can also kill. Even marrying and having children is in line with the law. There were quite a number of people who chanted Amitabha Buddha in front of them. A fat and big-eared monk had his own wife and children behind him. It was very beautiful. Otherwise, how could monks have become such a popular profession during the Celestial Empire? Some famous monasteries even insisted on Buddhist postgraduates and doctorate. With a lower educational background, you wouldn't even have the qualifications to look at Buddha. Alright. I promise you. Gohan thought about it and felt that he had no other choice but to agree to Vairocana's conditions. The entire Spirit Mountain was completely wiped out, and Great Rulai himself was also half dead. He even looked like he was seeking death. Facing such an opponent, Gohan really couldn't think of a way to make him take the initiative to repair his immortal trapping sword. Helpless, he could only agree. It was just being a monk. It wasn't a big deal. Gohan didn't care about such things. Alright. Good. Alright. Mahavairocana said the word good 3 times in a row before sighing. The heavens haven't destroyed my Buddhism. With Junior Martial Brother Gohan joining my Buddhism won't be destroyed. Junior Martial Brother, please forgive me for my lack of consideration. Most of the spiritual mountain has withered, and I'm taking in a disciple on behalf of my master. Junior Martial Brother Gohan's status is revered, so I should have set up the Vajra Arhat Buddhist light array, and at the same time, invited the big shots of the 3 realms of man, immortal, and demon to congratulate you and share in this grand event. It's a pity that I don't have the strength to do so. I can't even leave this place, so I can only simplify everything. Vairocana said to Gohan in shame. That's perfect. Gohan heaved a sigh of relief. If he really set up such a grand event, the ceremony would probably take at least 10 days to half a month. Gohan didn't have that much time to wait for the ceremony. It was better to do it as soon as possible so that Vairocana could repair the immortal entrapment sword for him as soon as possible. Vairocana nodded. Before anyone could react, he suddenly inserted his right hand into his chest and pulled out a relic that shone with Buddhist light. As the relic left his body, Vairocana's entire body became dispirited. At the same time, his skin and muscles began to contract rapidly, and he soon became like a mummy. Junior Martial Brother, keep this sage relic well. Everything you want is in this sage relic, Vairocana said to Gohan in his final extremely withered voice. At this moment, Vairocana's voice had become as coarse and deep as an ancient piano that hadn't been repaired for a long time. It was obvious that he didn't have much time left. Sage relic? Gohan was shocked. Since this relic dared to name itself as a sage, didn't that mean that this relic was left behind by a sage? Senior Martial Brother, I still have something to ask you. This sage relic is... Gohan was about to ask Vairocana for an explanation, but Vairocana's skeleton collapsed in an instant, leaving only a pale human skin on the praying mat. The entire spirited mountain suddenly began to shake violently, and the Tempest Temple, which was an extremely majestic building, began to gradually collapse. Junior Marshal brother, remember, you must not be forced by emotions. You must kill when you need to, and you must not be wrong. A melodious voice that sounded like a great bell suddenly floated in the hall. This was probably Vairocana's last words. However, after hearing this, Gohan's expression became extremely ugly. The meaning of this sentence was not difficult to understand, but once it was understood, anyone's expression would probably become as ugly as Gohan's. The spirited mountain is about to be destroyed. Let's leave immediately. Otherwise, once the dimensional mark breaks, we will have no way to return. In just a second, Gohan put away all his previous thoughts and jumped down from the spirited mountain with Song Yifei, Lu Shihua, and his sword ladies. They found the dimensional mark that they came from and sprinted along it. When Gohan finally returned to the dimension wall in the real world, the colored mark line had also completely disappeared. This also meant that the spirited mountain on the other side of the mark line had completely collapsed. Damn it, this Vairocana actually deceived us and tricked Gohan into becoming a monk to trouble the Son of God. In the end, the immortal entrapping sword still wasn't repaired. This big liar, we suffered a huge loss. After Song Yifei heaved a sigh of relief when he set foot on Earth again, he couldn't help but start cursing. Lu Shihua was not as happy as Song Yifei. Instead, he looked at his master very worriedly, for fear that his master was in a bad mood after being deceived by Vairocana. He was already prepared to comfort his master at any time. Stop cursing. The other party is dead after all. Let's respect the dead. Gohan sighed and looked at the worried Lu Shihua behind him. Don't worry about Master. Master won't take such a small matter to heart. Yes. Lu Shihua nodded obediently. At the same time, Gohan suddenly took out a white leather case from his dimensional pocket. After looking at it for a while, he let out a long sigh and threw it into Song Yifei's hands. He said to Song Yifei, "Dig a hole and bury him." Song Yifei responded subconsciously. He took the white leather case and looked at it in his hand. Then, he screamed and threw the leather case on the ground. He was so scared that he was trembling. This was a very rare thing. Song Yifei was an immortal sword wielder, after all, and yet he was scared to this extent by a leather sheath. Lu Shihua curiously came over to take a look. He was also shocked. Looking at the eyes, nose, and mouth on the leather case, Lu Shihua immediately realized what was going on. This was not a leather case, it was clearly a piece of human skin. However, Lu Shihua had been on the battlefield for a long time, and had seen all kinds of tragic scenes. A piece of human skin was not enough to completely break Lu Shihua down. Only someone like Song Yifei, who was a celestial tier sword wielder but had pitifully little actual combat experience, would be frightened by a piece of human skin. At the same time, Lu Shihua also noticed that there were 12 black bumps on the head of this human skin. His heart skipped a beat, and he asked Gohan in disbelief, "Master, is this the skin of Vairocana?" "Yes, this is the skin of my cheap senior brother Vairocana." Gohan nodded and said with a gloomy expression, "You be starred Gohan, why did you bring your senior brother's skin back? Wouldn't it be better to let him stay quietly in the dimensional space?" Song Yifei, who had calmed down, could not help but curse. Song Yifei also remembered that when Vairocana died, although his bones, flesh, and everything else had dissipated, only this human skin was left. He did not expect that Gohan would bring it back. "There's more than one piece of human skin." Gohan smiled nonchalantly. Suddenly, he threw out more than 10 bones from his dimensional pocket and piled them up with Vairocana's human skin. He gestured for Song Yifei to dig a hole and bury it together. "Enough, Gohan, what are you doing?" Song Yifei felt like she was going crazy. How could he bring such things back? Song Yifei thought that Gohan was crazy, but Lu Shihua knew that her master was not crazy, and he would never do anything without a goal. Since Gohan had brought back Vairocana's human skin and these bones, there must be a deeper meaning to it. At this time, Lu Shihua, who had been a leader for 20 years, was already considered a top wise person. She thought for a while, and immediately had a shocked expression on her face. She asked Gohan in disbelief, "Master, could it be that Vairocana and the monks on Spirited Mountain are all—" "Yes." Gohan looked at Lu Shihua and nodded. Then, he shook his head and sighed a few times. "I didn't expect you to see it too. Sigh, there are so many changes in this world. I didn't expect it. Chapter 1490. What kind of riddle are the two of you talking about? Don't exclude me, okay? Seeing that Lu Shihua and Gohan seemed to have understood the meaning behind it, Song Yifei still felt confused. It was as if she had returned to the time when Gohan and Liuyan Ling were whispering to each other in Chongyang Mountain. Suddenly, a sour grievance surged in her heart as she said resentfully, "Shihua, explain it to Yifei. Shihua, explain it to Yifei. Master is tired. Master wants to take a nap." Gohan waved his hand and took out a tent from his dimensional pocket. He then went to sleep in the tent. "You!" Song Yifei suddenly felt angry. Lu Shihua hurriedly pulled Song Yifei's hand and whispered to her, "Miss Yifei, don't blame Master anymore. Master is not in a good mood now. Don't add oil to the fire." "Why is he in a bad mood?" "He's the one who became a monk, and he's also the one who brought his senior brother's people back. I think he's in a good mood." Song Yifei rolled his eyes at Lu Shihua, but he was just venting. Song Yifei also knew that Gohan hadn't slept for 3 days and 3 nights, and he was really tired. After venting the dissatisfaction in her heart, Song Yifei took the initiative to pull Lu Shihua's sleeve and asked, "Good Shihua, tell me, what's going on with this human skin? Why did Gohan bring this human skin and these bones back?" "Because Master wants to see if this human skin and bones will be brought back by the dimensional vortex," Song Yifei said with her head lowered. "What's there to see? Since Yuan Ko is dead, his things will naturally be absorbed by the dimensional vortex." Before Song Yifei could finish speaking, she saw the human skin at her feet. Her heart was in turmoil. At the same time, she completely understood why Gohan had brought this human skin and bones back. Just as Song Yifei had said, as long as it was a Yuanko, the person's skin and bones would be absorbed by the dimensional vortex. Previously, because the bones and human skin were in the dimensional space, Gohan didn't know if the dimensional vortex would appear in the dimensional space. Therefore, even if the bones had been intact on Mount Numinous for hundreds of years, Gohan couldn't be sure what had happened. However, when the skin and bones were brought back to the real world, today's guess was confirmed. Since the skin and bones were not absorbed by the dimensional vortex, there was only one explanation. The owner of the skin was Vairocana, and the remains of the monks in the Spirited Mountain were not Yuanko, but native creatures of this world. That's right, Vairocana wasn't Yuanko, but a native of this world. Once this shocking discovery was announced, it would immediately cause the entire history of mankind to be rewritten. This was simply a shocking fact. However, this fact was indeed shocking at first, but on second thought, it didn't seem impossible. After all, there was such an example in the past, and that was our classmate Ing Zheng. As a native of the witch tribe, he successfully lived for more than 3,000 years by constantly being reborn as a baby. He stayed in this era and once again became the leader of the human race. In that case, it seemed natural that Vairocana and Monk Numinous Mountain, who were far stronger than Ing Zheng, could also live from ancient times to the present day. However, there were still many doubtful points. If Vairocana and even the entire Spirited Mountain were native creatures, why did they get involved with Yuan Ko? Moreover, they claimed to be Yuan Ko from the beginning and never mentioned anything about being native creatures. Moreover, before the spirited mountain disappeared, humans had fought many times with the forces of the spirited mountain. The battle in the Alps was initiated by Vairocana, and the entire spirited mountain acted together. The contact between humans and the spirited mountain could be said to be countless. At that time, the Yuan Ko of the spirited mountain was the real Yuan Ko. His dead body would be absorbed by the dimensional vortex, and his body was filled with the dimensional force that belonged to Yuan Ko. There was absolutely no sign of him being a native creature. How did he become a native creature now? Also, if the spirited mountain was really a native creature, it should have been the most natural ally of humans. Even if the spirited mountain did not care about the incense offerings that humans had offered for thousands of years, just the fact that everyone was a native creature of Earth was enough for them to walk together and depend on each other. However, in the end, the spirited mountain actually became humanity's greatest opponent and colluded with Yuan Ko, almost completely destroying humanity. How could they look like a natural ally? These 3 points alone were enough for Song Yifei to be filled with doubts about the spirited mountain being a native creature of humans. However, there was another thing that lingered in Song Yifei's mind. If the spirited mountain was really a native of Earth, were the branches of the heavenly courts, mountain paradise, and other native religions also native creatures of Earth? At the thought of this, Song Yifei felt a headache coming on. He was unwilling to continue thinking and could only look at Gohan's tent for help, hoping that when Gohan walked out of the tent, he would be able to resolve his doubts. Song Yifei initially thought that Gohan would be able to walk out of the tent after one night. In fact, Song Yifei and Lu Shihua had been waiting for 15 days, but Gohan was still in the tent. If Lu Shihua and Song Yifei hadn't been able to clearly sense Gohan's aura in the tent and secretly open the door of the tent, they would have thought that Gohan was indeed meditating in the tent, or they would have thought that Gohan had disappeared again. Just when Song Yifei and Lu Shihua were considering whether they should forcefully wake Gohan up, Gohan's tent finally opened by itself, and Gohan slowly walked out of the tent. However, Gohan had clearly rested for 15 days, but when he came out, his footsteps were still weak, his skin was loose, and his eyes were red and swollen. He did not look like he had slept for 15 days, but more like he had been working non-stop for 15 days. Gohan, what happened to you? Master, are you okay? Song Yifei and Lu Shihua asked with concern at the same time, but Gohan did not answer. Instead, he glanced back and forth between Lu Shihua and Song Yifei with hesitation. He took a deep breath and asked, Yifei, are you willing to become a husband and wife with me? Song Yifei was shocked, and he did not dare to look at Gohan's eyes. He only dared to blink at Lu Shihua, but Lu Shihua also looked confused, indicating that he had no idea that his master would suddenly say such a thing. Gohan, are you crazy? Or should I say that you are not wrong? What about the relationship between a husband and wife? You won't kiss or hold hands. Song Yifei hesitated and said incoherently. I am not crazy. The relationship between a husband and wife is the relationship between a husband and wife in your imagination, Gohan said calmly. Song Yifei was completely silent, and after a long time, he asked faintly, I can give you anything, but can you give me a reason? To save the lives of all humans, is this reason enough? Gohan asked in a very dry tone. Is this the reason? Of course it's enough. Although Song Yifei said that, he did not sound happy at all. Sacrificing his own body for the sake of the human race, this reason sounded so ridiculous. Although Song Yifei knew that what Gohan said was most likely not a lie, but the truth. Although Song Yifei was willing to give himself to Gohan 1,000 times over in his heart, but using such a reason to convince himself, Song Yifei felt as if thousands of streams of bitterness flowed through his heart. Master, let me do it. Just when Song Yifei was hesitating, Lu Shihua, who was silent with his head down, suddenly jumped out and recommended himself to Gohan. Master, let me do it. If it's just for sex, Miss Fei and I are the same. Since it's to save humans, let me do it." After saying that, Lu Shihua felt his body soften, and all the power that suddenly appeared just now disappeared in an instant. Only the heavens knew how much courage Lu Shihua had to expend to make such a shocking move. Lu Shihua knew better than anyone else that because of their relationship as master and disciple, he was actually the furthest one, even though he seemed to be the closest to his master. Before his rebirth, Lu Shihua was still ignorant about the relationship between him and his master. Chapter 1491. What are you arguing about? Seeing that Song Yifei and Lu Shihua were about to fight, Gohan was speechless. In fact, anyone with a brain would know that Gohan should not have made such a request at this time. If Gohan was really in a hurry for women, he could have secretly done it with Song Yifei at night. There was no need for him to make such a request in the day. However, Gohan had no choice. If Gohan did not do this, Gohan might not even live for 20 minutes. Gohan smiled bitterly as he looked at Song Yifei and Lu Shihua glaring at each other. "I'm afraid this Vairocana is trying to kill me." That day Gohan was really tired and went to bed early. After waking up, he wanted to return to Yuzhong City directly. However, he thought about how he had gone all the way to find Vairocana, only to find that he was a native and nothing else. The celestial trapping sword still looked like an ancient sword. This made Gohan a little unhappy. Gohan thought about it carefully and felt that Vairocana would not speak without thinking. His words before he died had a deep meaning. Moreover, from the fact that he insisted on accepting a disciple on behalf of his master and made him his junior brother, Vairocana should be hiding a deep plan in his heart. The most likely thing for this plan was the sage relic that Vairocana had given to him before he died. Therefore, Gohan immediately took out the sage relic. However, no matter how he looked at it, he could not see any clues. It was like an ordinary stone that only glowed. He recalled that Mingyuan Jiandi had once said that the foundation of a sage was on the consciousness fragment. Therefore, Gohan suddenly wondered if the sage relic could also be activated by the consciousness fragment. Therefore, Gohan separated a fragment of his consciousness and quietly seeped into the sage relic. Just as Gohan had guessed, when Gohan's consciousness fragment touched the sage relic actually turned into a ray of light and directly fused with Gohan's consciousness fragment. At the same time, a large wave of memories entered Gohan's mind through the fragments of consciousness, causing Gohan to fall into a deep slumber once again. It was only after 10 days that Gohan had completely absorbed all the memories in the saint's relic that he found out the ins and outs of everything. He even knew how this damned world had been formed and how the great calamity had occurred. It turned out that this sage's relic, just like its name, had indeed come from a sage. Moreover, it was the most powerful sage in the legends, the guide sage. After Pangu created the world, apart from Saint Hongjun, 6 other saints were born. They were Taishang Laojun, Tongtian sect leader, primordial lord of heaven, Jie-in sage, Zhuanti sage, and Lady Nuo. Among them, the guide sage and Taishang Laojun were the strongest, second only to Hongjun, while Lady Nuo was the weakest. Of course, even if it was the weakest sage, Lady Nuo could still crush all the other opponents and was invincible below the sage level. After the world went through a few great calamities, after the journey to the west during the Tang dynasty, the Jie sect completely declined, and the Chan sect was plucked. Although Taoism did not lose anything, it did not gain anything either. Only the Buddhism of the 2 sages of the West benefited a lot from the many calamities. In the end, they even overstepped their boundaries and took over the faith of the entire Huaxia in one fell swoop, becoming the #1 religion in Huaxia, comparable to the Green sect and the White sect. During the Great Ming dynasty, a human named Lu Bowen used the opportunity of the rotation of destiny to directly cut off the dragon vein of heaven and earth, completely separating the heavenly court from the human world. From then on, both the heavenly court and spirited mountain were directly exiled into the dimensional space and could no longer enter the main world. What he saw was that Huaxia had lost the protection of heaven and earth. As a result, it was successively invaded by the remnants of the Wu people's female Zhenren and the enemy of the West. Huaxia suffered heavy losses, and peace was only restored when a genius of the generation was born. However, this genius of the generation was even more domineering than Lu Bowen back then. He directly turned all the immortals and demons into demons and suppressed them. As a result, Huaxia was completely free from the control of the immortals and demons. This genius of the generation had good intentions. He hoped that human beings could be independent from then on and control their own destiny with their own strength, no longer needing to be controlled by those so-called immortals and demons. However, he did not expect that it would become an opportunity for another guy lurking in the dark to stir up trouble. After the Battle of God's Investiture, the Jie sect suffered a great defeat. The 4 fairy-slaying swords of sect leader Tongtian were even taken away by the 4 sages, Taishang Laojun, Yuanshi Tianzuan, Jie Yin Sage, and Zhuandi Sage. Only the Qinpin sword was left with him. Sect leader Tongtian was directly brought back to the Purple Cloud Palace by Hongjun and put into indefinite confinement. It was said that sect leader Tongtian would only be set free when he came to his senses. Being besieged by 4 people, sect leader Tongtian was extremely angry. Of the tens of thousands of disciples he mentioned, most of them were directly beaten to death. The few who survived became the mounts of the immortals and bodhisattvas. It should be noted that these immortals and bodhisattvas used to call their disciples brothers and sisters. They used their junior brothers as their mounts and even castrated their junior brothers. Only 2 or 3 kittens and puppies survived. They trembled and hid in the Azure Palace, not daring to come out. Sect leader Tongtian was originally a man of temperament. Even after he became a sage, his temperament did not change. Therefore, those who were to his liking or directly asked for their help were all accepted as disciples by sect leader Tongtian. At the same time, he taught each of them well. He passed on his skills to each of them, and even passed on precious primordial spiritual treasures. This showed how much sect leader Tongtian loved his disciples. When sect leader Tongtian learned about what had happened to his disciples, he was filled with anger. He took the initiative to find his master, Hongjun, hoping that his master could take care of his suffering disciples. He did not seek to rebuild the Jie school. He only hoped that those disciples could go to the Azure Palace and no longer be the mounts of those people. However, Ancestor Hongjun only said that this was the mandate of heaven, which could not be violated. These disciples should have a tribulation in their lives. He asked sect leader Tongtian to reflect on himself and not think about these unnecessary things. As a result, Ancestor Hongjuan's words completely infuriated sect leader Tongtian. He directly pulled out the Qingping sword and stabbed it into Hongjuan's body. Then Hongjun died. Ancestor Hongjun had always been invincible in this world. Although the 6 sages were his disciples, none of them had the ability to defeat Ancestor Hongjun. The sages even thought that Ancestor Hongjun had surpassed the sage realm and reached another realm beyond the sage realm. Therefore, sect leader Tongtian's sword was mostly to vent his anger. He never thought that he could defeat Ancestor Hongjun. However, he never expected that Ancestor Hongjun would be killed by sect leader Tongtian. After killing his master, sect leader Tongtian simply killed everyone in the Purple Cloud Palace. At the same time, he strictly blocked the news, so that no one in the world knew that Ancestor Hongjun had been killed. At this time, sect leader Tongtian seemed to be completely controlled by something. He should have called back all his disciples and re-established the Jie school. However, he secretly lurked in the Purple Cloud Palace again. At the same time, he secretly sent 2 doppelgangers to the extreme west and the extreme south. One of them was named Jehovah, and the other was named Allah. They founded the Green School and the White School respectively. At the same time, they gathered the local aborigines and developed the population. In the end, they managed to create 2 religions that could be compared with Buddhism. At the same time, with the help of the great wish brought by these 2 religions, sect leader Tongtian's strength increased at an astonishing rate and reached a terrifying level. At the same time, sect leader Tongtian began to secretly plot against the other sages. Therefore, he secretly bewitched Lu Bowen and taught him the method to cut off the power of heaven and earth. For the first time, Lu Bowen cut off the connection between heaven and earth, so that the gods in the sky lost the way to obtain the great wish from Huaxia. At the same time, he secretly supported the New Jin clan, so that the New Jin clan could conquer the world 300 years later and destroy the faith of the entire Yan Huang. At this time, the other sages also found that something was wrong. They immediately gathered in the Purple Cloud Palace, hoping that ancestor Hongjun could come out and take charge of the situation. On the other hand, Grandmaster Tongtian disguised himself as Hongjun ancestor and deceived the other 5 saints into the Purple Cloud Palace. Then, the 2 sides began a chaotic battle. Because they had lost the support of the great wish of the world, the 5 sages were unable to defeat sect leader Tongtian, even though they had the advantage in strength. Sect leader Tongtian had also wrongly estimated his own strength. He had always thought that he could defeat the 5 saints, but in the end, he ended up in a stalemate. This stalemate lasted for 300 years, and it was time for the chi of heaven and earth to change. According to the original plan of the heavenly courts, they planned to support a certain bald man. However, in the end, a generation's pride appeared out of nowhere and actually reversed the fate set by the heavenly courts. He snatched the big one from the small, and a single spark could start a prairie fire. He forcibly killed everyone and achieved an unprecedented cause. After that, this pride completely destroyed the Confucian sect, the last faith of Yan Huang, and completely changed the world. From then on, the world was different. However, he did not expect that he had secretly helped the Tongtian sect leader. With the complete change of the world, the 5 sages also completely lost the support of the great wish of the world. The balance of strength began to reverse. 5 against 1, they were actually suppressed by sect leader Tongtian. Seeing that sect leader Tongtian was about to succeed in his revenge, the 5 sages had no choice but to take out their last trump card, which was the 4 immortal slaying swords that they obtained from sect leader Tongtian. Chapter 1492. When sect leader Tongtian saw the 5 sages take out the 4 immortal killing swords, he was not surprised. Instead, he was delighted. The sages thought that they had removed the imprint of sect leader Tongtian in the 4 immortal killing swords, but they did not know that sect leader Tongtian had also buried his consciousness fragments in the 4 immortal killing swords. When the 5 sages took the 4 immortal killing swords and were about to turn the situation around and enter sect leader Tongtian's body, sect leader Tongtian directly contacted the consciousness fragments buried in the 4 immortal killing swords. Through the consciousness fragments, he was prepared to erase the imprints of the 4 sages and regain control of the 4 immortal killing swords. When the sages saw this, they could not help but turn pale with fright. They could not defeat sect leader Tongtian. If sect leader Tongtian regained control of the 4 immortal killing swords, they would not want to live anymore. They would just wash their necks and let sect leader Tongtian kill them. The sages also understood that the key to victory was in the 4 immortal killing sword. Whoever could hold the control of the 4 immortal killing swords in the end would be the final winner. Therefore, the 4 sages who directly controlled the 4 immortal killing swords followed suit. They also injected their own consciousness fragments into the 4 immortal killing swords, using their own consciousness fragments to compete with sect leader Tongtian's consciousness fragments for control of the 4 immortal killing sword. As a result, the battle became a very funny one. It was a battle between the consciousness fragments of the sages. Because this battle was too important, no one could afford to lose this battle. The final result was that both sides kept injecting their own consciousness fragments into the bodies of the 4 immortal killing sword. As a result, there were more and more consciousness fragments in the bodies of the 4 immortal killing sword. The consciousness fragments belonging to different sides were squeezed together in the end. Under the urging of external forces, they kept attacking, but at the same time, they kept fusing. In the end, a situation that all the sages did not expect happened. The consciousness fragments that poured into the bodies of the 4 immortal killing swords finally fused together and turned into 4 real consciousnesses. Together with the original spiritual consciousness and memory of the 4 immortal killing swords, the result was the birth of 4 new personalities. I'm sure everyone has guessed that these were the first 4 sword maidens. Slaying immortal sword, slashing immortal sword, trapping immortal sword, and slaughtering immortal sword. These 4 were the ancestors of all sword maidens, the first batch of sword maidens in this world, and also the most powerful. After the birth of the 4 sword ladies, the ownership of the 4 immortal killing swords naturally fell into the hands of the 4 sword ladies. It was no longer under the control of Tongtian and the other 5 sages. And the battle also changed from fighting for the 4 immortal execution swords to persuading the 4 immortal execution sword. Whoever could convince the 4 immortal slaying swords to stand on their side would obtain the final victory. There was no detailed description of how he convinced the other party back then. However, Gohan knew that sect leader Tongtian, who was the original owner of the 4 immortal killing swords, did not win in the end. Instead, it was the 5 sages who persuaded the 4 immortal killing swords to help them kill sect leader Tongtian. Sect leader Tongtian was completely enraged when he saw that his original weapon, his personal partner, had chosen to help the enemy in the end. Or rather, he had turned completely dark. After turning dark, sect leader Tongtian once again unleashed an even more powerful force. Even with the help of the 4 immortal killing swords, the 5 sages were still in a stalemate with sect leader Tongtian. They dared not harm the primary world during their battle, so they could only fight in the dimensional worlds. As a result, the aftermath of the battle directly broke through the dimensional walls of the dimensional worlds, allowing the creatures of the dimensional worlds to enter the primary world through the holes in the dimensional walls. This was also the reason why the first batch of Yuan Ko arrived. At the same time, this day was also the day the Great Apocalypse began. It is worth mentioning that when Yuan Ko first entered the primary world, there was actually a division between good and evil. Some of the Yuan Ko, who were born with murderous and sinful thoughts, naturally launched a monstrous massacre on humans. However, there were also some Yuan Ko who did not harm humans. Instead, they chose to help humans, such as Dangma Jojo and Misaka Mikoto. From the beginning, they stood on the side of humans and helped humans maintain the order of the primary world. This was also the reason why humans were able to protect the human race from extinction at the beginning of the Great Apocalypse, and even defend Yanjing City in the end. On the other hand, sect leader Tongtian, who was fighting in the dimensional space, became stronger as the battle went on. As the human world was destroyed, the strength of the 5 great sages became weaker and weaker. Just as they were about to die under sect leader Tongtian's sword, 2 unknown sword energies suddenly appeared. One sword energy helped sect leader Tongtian, and the other sword energy helped the 5 sages. The sword energy that helped the 5 sages was obviously stronger than the sword energy that helped sect leader Tongtian. The role of these 2 sword energies should not be underestimated. The balance of the battle was originally only a hair's breadth apart. Once one side received a little more help, the balance would completely tilt to one side. Moreover, in terms of strength, the sword energy that came to help was actually not weaker than Taishang Laojun and Saint Jiayin. As for the sword energy that helped sect leader Tongtian, it was at most the power of goddess Nviwa. In the end, with the help of this sudden sword energy, the 5 sages completely suppressed sect leader Tongtian. Just as they were about to kill or seal sect leader Tongtian chose to perish together with all of his opponents. All of his strength exploded in an instant. The 5 sages were caught off guard. The 3 sages, Saint Zhuanti, Heavenly Primogenitor, and Goddess Nviwa, were directly destroyed by the explosion and disappeared completely. The Qingping sword and the 4 immortal exterminating swords were all blown up like scrap metal. In the end, they returned to the main world and disappeared. Only Taishang Laojun and Saint Jiayin, who were slightly stronger, survived. However, even if they survived, their physical bodies were destroyed. Only a part of their primordial spirit and consciousness fragments maintained their existence. They would probably need to rest for tens of millions of years to recover. Taishang Laojun and Saint Jiayin, who survived, were ready to clean up the mess. However, they were horrified to find that sect leader Tongtian was actually not completely dead like them. His power had merged with the dimension wall of the entire dimensional world. Without the control of the main consciousness, he would instinctively open the barrier between the dimension wall and the main world from time to time, letting Yuan Ko enter the main world. Anyone who entered the main world through this barrier would be contaminated by the power of sect leader Tongtian and become full of killing intent towards humans. This was also the origin of filth. To put it bluntly, each filth was actually a fragment of sect leader Tongtian's consciousness. Sect leader Tongtian was so powerful that he could even surpass sages. When the fragment of sect leader Tongtian's consciousness was attached to Yuanko's body, it was no wonder that Yuanko completely lost his mind, was completely controlled by the filth, and wanted to kill all human beings. This filth even invaded the heavenly court, spirited mountain, and the dimensional space where all the indigenous deities lived. It directly contaminated these indigenous deities and turned them into existences like Yuan Ko. In the end, sect leader Tongtian's primordial spirit was still alive and turned into a black crystal. This black crystal was no longer something that Taishang Laojun and Saint Jiayin, who had lost most of their power, could completely destroy. Seeing that the originally beautiful human world had fallen to such a state because of their battle back then, Taishang Laojun and the Saint of Reception felt extremely ashamed. Therefore, Taishang Laojun and the Saint of Reception decided to use the Sanzang Book of Changes together to calculate how the future would turn out. In the end, after spending their origin to calculate, Taishang Laojun and Saint Jiayin discovered that although the heavenly Tao had been completely destroyed, the great Tao of this world still existed. Moreover, as long as the great Tao still existed, the power that repaired the world would actively maintain the stability of the world. At the same time, an existence that could save the world would be born, which was the legendary Leveler. At the same time, the 2 big shots also learned that this was the greatest calamity since the creation of the main world. It was a calamity that no sages could escape from. If this calamity was quelled by the Evaluator, this world would continue to exist for a long time and become an eternal world. There would be no need to worry about the destruction of the entire world. However, if the Leveler failed, the entire world would completely disappear. Not a single trace could be found, and no one would be able to survive. After figuring out these things, Taishang Laojun and Saint Jiayin decided to use the last of their power to pave the way for the Leveler that would be born in the future and make one last effort to save this world. After a discussion, Taishang Laojun decided to use the last of his power to turn into a zone that was completely isolated from time and space. He sealed the black crystal so that it could no longer directly affect the power that belonged to the Grand Master of Heaven that was scattered on the dimension wall. On the other hand, Saint Jie-in chose to do the same thing as the Grandmaster of Heaven. He let all of his power dissipate and attached it to the dimension wall, forming the recovery mechanism of the dimension wall so that the dead Yuan Ko could return to their original dimensional world. That was because once the corpses of the Yuan Ko were completely left in the main world and could not return to their original dimensional world, the original dimensional world would gradually begin to collapse. In particular, if the protagonist of the original dimensional world died and could not return, the dimensional world would collapse directly. The entire world itself was constructed from the main world and countless derived dimensional worlds. Once the dimensional world disappeared, the main world itself would also be destroyed. Therefore, in order to maintain the existence of the main world, Saint Jie-in had no choice but to use his power to build the final recovery mechanism, which was the dimensional whirlpool, to ensure that the other dimensional worlds could continue to exist stably. At the same time, Saint Jie-in injected his last consciousness fragment, which was the saint's relic that Gohan had obtained, into Vairocana's body. However, because it was deeply controlled by filth, the power of the saint's relic was also very weak. Therefore, although the saint's relic had entered Vairocana's body, it did not change the fact that Vairocana had been defiled and turned into Yuan Ko. This was also the reason why the spirited mountain and humans had been fighting non-stop for hundreds of years. It was not until the defeat in the Alps that the filth in Vairocana's body weakened greatly that the saint's relic took the opportunity to break through the seal of filth, allowing Vairocana to regain his rationality. At the same time, it told Vairocana everything. After understanding that all of his subordinates had been misunderstood and controlled, Vairocana made a shocking decision, which was to use his own power to kill all the monks who had been misunderstood and controlled. In other words, the corpses that Gohan and the rest saw on the spirited mountain were actually all killed by Vairocana himself. As Vairocana had originally controlled all the monks' lives, it was only a matter of seconds for him to kill them. This was also the reason why the corpses of the monks maintained a peaceful attitude before they died and did not resist at all. It was because their master had killed them. However, after killing all of his subordinates, the foundation and willpower of Vairocana's existence were completely destroyed. Vairocana could only rely on the last saint's relic to struggle at death's door and live in the spirited mountain for hundreds of years. According to the instructions in the saint's relic, he would wait for the stabilizer to appear and hand the saint's relic to the stabilizer. At the same time, the stabilizer would know everything that had happened in this world. After losing the power of the saint's relic, Vairocana no longer had anything to rely on to survive. In the end, he could only become a piece of human skin. Similarly, the existence of the spirited mountain depended on Vairocana's existence to begin with. Following Vairocana's death, the spirited mountain completely returned to nothingness. This was the source of everything, the reason for the birth of the great calamity. After obtaining this saint's relic, Gohan finally understood the whole story. 1,000 years later, the human race, who had gone through so much suffering and fought for 1,000 years in confusion, finally learned the truth of what had happened back then. It was just that the truth had come a little too late. After going through all the memories, Gohan could not help but sigh emotionally. Chapter 1493. Gohan had never expected that he would be able to find out the truth behind the apocalypse from this saint's relic. This truth appeared so abruptly that Gohan could not react for a moment, until he confirmed it again and again, and at the same time compared to the fragmented stories he heard from the 4 Zhu-Xian swords, the two were very consistent. It seemed like this was most likely the truth. Later, Gohan used the information in the saint's relic to confirm it with the 4 immortal exterminating swords. After learning that Gohan had grasped the entire truth through the saint's relic, the 4 immortal exterminating swords simply admitted that the reason for the apocalypse was indeed as the saint's relic had said. The truth of the apocalypse had been completely confirmed. Before this, Gohan had thought that he would never be able to figure out the truth behind the great apocalypse in his lifetime. After all, humans had spent 1,000 years trying to figure out the story behind it. However, on second thought, he realized that there was still a very crucial question that had not been answered in the Saint's relic: the reason for the appearance of the Sword Ladies. The reason for the appearance of the first batch of Sword Ladies in the world was clear. It was the self-consciousness of the four immortal exterminating swords due to the entanglement of their respective consciousness fragments during the battle between sect leader Tong Tian and the other sages. However, what about the other Sword Ladies? How was the self-consciousness of the Qingping sword born? How was the self-consciousness of the heavenly sword born? As for the tens of thousands of natural Sword Ladies, how were their consciousnesses born? Gohan also asked the four immortal exterminating swords in his hand. In the end, the four immortal exterminating swords said that they did not know the reason behind it either. After being beaten back to the main world, the four immortal exterminating swords fell into a coma for more than 100 years. When they woke up again, the Sword Ladies had already spread all over the world. They were also confused about the reason for their appearance. Although there was no way to solve the mystery of the Sword Lady's appearance, it was already a huge gift for Gohan to obtain the truth of the Great Apocalypse. What made Gohan even more excited was that the Saint's relic contained the various grievances between the sages back then and the truth of the Great Apocalypse. Other than detailing the various grudges between the saints back then and the truth behind the Great Calamity, the sage relics also contained the most important cultivation techniques of the saints. Although Gohan was only a celestial sword level sword wielder, Emperor sword level was something that Gohan could easily obtain. As long as the celestial captive sword could be restored, Gohan could immediately ascend to the throne and become an Emperor sword level sword wielder. Therefore, the real obstacle in front of Gohan now was how to surpass the Emperor sword-level sword wielder and become a sage. Everyone might think that Gohan was too greedy. Emperor sword level was already the peak of humanity. Why would Gohan still want to pursue that so-called saint? It was not that Gohan wanted to become a sage. It was that Gohan had no choice but to become a sage. In other words, Gohan had to become a sage. Otherwise, this world would still be finished. After all, it was very likely that the Tongtian sect master would be resurrected soon. According to the sage relics, the Tongtian sect master's power was attached to the dimension wall and became the culprit of opening the dimension rift. The Tongtian sect master's consciousness fragments became the source of corruption. After that, the Tongtian sect master's primordial spirit was sealed by Taishang Laojun. Therefore, the Tongtian sect master's body was not dead. As long as the Tongtian sect master's primordial spirit could be resurrected and at the same time, he could collect his own power and the corrupted consciousness fragment, then the Tongtian sect master could probably be resurrected. If the Tongtian sect master wanted to resurrect, the most important thing was the sealed primordial spirit. According to the sage relics, the thing that was used to seal the Tongtian sect master's primordial spirit was none other than the seamless corridor. The fact that Gohan was able to meet Taishang Laojun's primordial spirit in the seamless corridor was the best evidence. This was because Taishang Laojun had used all of his remaining power to seal the Tongtian sect master's primordial spirit. At the same time, the chaotic spacetime in the seamless corridor just happened to confirm the sage relic's word. According to Mingyuan Jiendi, not long after she entered the seamless corridor collapsed on its own. The time when Mingyuan Jiendi entered the seamless corridor should have happened not long after Gohan left the seamless corridor. Gohan didn't even need to use his but to guess. After all, it was because Taishang Laojun had forcibly sent him away that Taishang Laojun had used up the last of his energy, causing the entire seamless corridor to collapse. This was why Mingyuan Jiendi had been thrown out by the seamless corridor. Since the seamless corridor had collapsed, Then what of the Tongtian sect master's primordial spirit which had been sealed away by the seamless corridor? It had most likely escaped from the seamless corridor and returned to the main world. When he thought back to the sage Shard's description of the Tongtian sect master's primordial spirit, which described it as a black crystal, Gohan immediately thought of the black crystal which Mingyuan Jiandi had controlled, and when he thought of how that black crystal was constantly absorbing the filth left behind by Yuan Ko after his death, Gohan was so terrified that he almost jumped up. There was a 90% chance that the black crystal was the Tongtian sect master's primordial spirit which had been sealed away by the seamless corridor. After the seamless corridor had collapsed, the black crystal had also returned to the main world, and then someone had delivered it to Mingyuan Jiandi. The most convincing evidence of this was the fact that the black crystal was constantly absorbing filth. At first, Gohan had thought that the black crystal was indeed a human treasure which could prevent the main world from being polluted by filth. But now, it seemed that the reason why the black crystal was absorbing filth was because the Tongtian sect master wanted to be resurrected. This was because all of the filth was actually a fragment of Tongtian's own consciousness. Once the Tongtian sect master absorbed the majority of the scattered fragments of consciousness, the time for the Tongtian sect master's resurrection would come. At that time, who knew what sort of terrifying things the completely corrupted Tongtian sect master would do to the human world after his resurrection? After understanding this point, Gohan didn't say anything else. He immediately decided to return to Mingyuan City, hoping to obtain the black crystal from Mingyuan Jiandi. At the same time, he wanted to completely control the black crystal, preventing any more filth from entering it and preventing the Tongtian sect master from being resurrected. In order to arrive as quickly as possible, Gohan didn't inform Song Yifei and Lu Shihua, who were waiting outside the tent. He secretly ran back to Mingyuan City through the void alone. Unfortunately, Gohan's return was a little too late. By the time Gohan arrived at Mingyuan City, it had already been completely razed to the ground. Yes, that's right, Mingyuan City had disappeared. The dimensional rift where Mingyuan City used to be had been razed to the ground. Apart from the broken walls all over the ground, there was no longer any trace of Mingyuan City's existence. Even Mingyuan Jiandi had disappeared without a trace. At that moment, Gohan realized that he was a step too late. The Tongtian sect master's spirit had probably been resurrected and destroyed Mingyuan City at the same time. As for Mingyuan Jiandi's fate, it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. If Mingyuan Jiandi had died in the hands of the Tongtian sect master, perhaps he would have avenged Mingyuan Jiandi. However, if Mingyuan Jiandi did not die and was captured alive by the Tongtian sect master, one could imagine what kind of pain and torture Mingyuan Jiandi was going through. After returning to the tent, Gohan realized that the situation he was facing now was completely different from before. In the past, as long as he could ascend to the throne and become the emperor, he was confident that he could face all the powerhouses in this world, kill them all, and reshape the human world. However, with the resurrection of the Tongtian sect master, the strongest person in the human world was no longer him, but the Tongtian sect master who was hiding in the dark. Now, the Tongtian sect master might still choose to lurk in the dark because he had not regained all his power. However, once the Tongtian sect master was completely resurrected, the greatest crisis of the human world would come. In the face of such a crisis, Gohan only had one way to deal with it, and that was to make himself stronger to the extent that he could fight the Tongtian sect master head-on. This was probably the reason why the Jie-in sage left the sage crystal to Gohan. Whether it was Fleeting Maple, Taishang Laojun, or the Jie-in sage, they all mentioned that a pacifier would automatically be born in the main world, and this pacifier was the only hope to save the whole world. Only this pacifier had a chance to defeat the Tongtian sect master. 1,000 years ago, a pacifier was born, and that was the Kanzu calendar. However, for some reason, Kanzu failed in the end, and no one knew whether he was dead or alive. It was not until 1,000 years later that the second pacifier was born. After so many years of fortuitous encounters and adventures, Gu Han could unreservedly say that he should be the pacifier, and he was destined to shoulder the heavy responsibility of saving the world, and only he could save the entire world. Taishang Laojun and the Jie-in sage also foresaw this, so they left everything to him, hoping that he could be cultivated and become another sage of the human world, because only a sage could deal with a sage. At the same time, Taishang Laojun and the Jie-in sage also believed that Gohan would definitely be able to take the last step and become a sage. Therefore, in this sage relic, the Jie-in sage told Gohan in detail how he should become a sage. According to the records in the sage relic, there were actually many ways to surpass an emperor's sword wielder and become a sage. There were a total of 3,000 ways. Gohan roughly looked through all 3,000 ways and found that most of them were meaningless and impossible to him. Since ancient times, there were only 3 ways to truly become a sage. However, no matter which one of these 3 ways, Gohan had to meet 3 conditions. If one of the conditions was missing, it would be impossible for Gohan to become a sage. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.